It's the same thing, that the insurance companies are like,
of the Board of Education. Roll call, please.
Ms. Conover? Here. Ms. Steckity?
here,
Mr. Marin?
Here.
Ms. Coyle?
Here.
Ms. Hoover? Mr. Avia?
Here.
Ms. Redonio?
here.
Okay, should we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Let me know in a minute where you want it sent.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item on the agenda is closed session. The chair will entertain a motion to enter closed session to discuss personnel issues and student discipline.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Avia?
Yes.
Ms. Redonio?
Yes.
Ms. Steckity?
Yes.
Ms. Conover?
Yes.
Mr. Marin?
Yes.
Ms. Coyle?
Yes.
I'll look. I gotta grab my stuff.
Waiting for the train, you can get up.
All right.
Okay. I only have a pen.
All right.
You don't care, I'll borrow Carla.
The board has returned from closed session. The first item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the February 8th, 2022 regular meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved. Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the closed session of the February 8th, 2022 regular meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the February 17th, 2022 special meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the closed session of the February 17th, 2022 special meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, motion carries. All right, the next item on the agenda is public comment. We do have a few public comments tonight. As we've done at past meetings, we'll just read the guidelines for public comment. Public comment is a time for the community to address the board with comments and questions. Each community member addressing the board has 5 minutes. Once you've been notified of your time is up, please kindly step away from the podium. Public comment will be for 30 minutes. Please understand this is not an engagement time. The board will consider your comments in its decisions. For those comments or questions requiring a follow-up response, the board president or superintendent will follow up. So the first public comment is from Susanna Morano.
Hello again. I heard about the board meeting today right after school, and I debated whether I should come speak today, but ultimately decided to. I just wanted to express that I found it kind of surprising because I was approached after the last meeting and told that not a lot of students talk at these meetings, and it was just pretty surprising. And I definitely plan on coming to more in the future and want to express to my peers that they should come as well. And I just wanted to ask of you all to please listen to actual students when it comes to discussing student issues, and just try to listen to more people who are directly affected when talking about issues that affect students. Though I'm not only talking about mask mandates, I would like to go to that just for a little bit. I'd appreciate if everything that me and Gabrielle said at the last meeting were taken into account when discussing the proposed plan and updating the plan. I saw that there could be updates to the mitigation plan. I just wanted to implore you guys to listen. And as a student that attends Westmont High School, I can say from experience that a plan that flip-flops, a plan where masks are optional one week and the next week will not completely be listened to by the entire student body. Students that do not want to wear masks, and again, I'm talking to you as a student that attends Westmont High School. People who don't want to wear masks will not wear masks even when they are told that they need to. If or when, really, cases go up, they will stay up due to people not listening. If the plan to mandate masks, when it gets bad enough, it's going to be in motion. I don't really see why masks shouldn't be mandated. I don't see that much point in there being a week where masks are not mandated and a mask being mandated the next week. And I don't understand why prevention tactics used to keep students safe are being removed. So I just wanted to ask for a stricter mitigation plan with more specifications and specific consequences for individuals who will not wear their masks when necessary. And I just wanted to ask, again, to listen to student bodies and listen to students who come and speak. And I implore more students to speak. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
The next public comment is from Stephen Fleck.
Stephen Fleck, I want to thank Glenn for last week. He corrected the sound situation and the new one's uploaded, by the way. I've spoken directly to some board members since the meeting. We saw Kevin's letter and I understand, yes, you voted. You're like halfway there. You guys do not have any authority under the law right now to be putting any kind of percentages on anything. I will guarantee you there is enough parents. You're overstepping your bounds. The courts have put things in place. We've asked you to give the option back. You're giving it back with rules. You don't get to place those rules. You are not lawmakers. The Illinois State Board of Education, the Illinois Department of Public Health, and the courts have all said, unless there's some direction or rules within our county, which you've all made it clear, I've gone to DuPage County Health Department, nobody's putting percentages on it. You don't get to put those. Every other school board around us, when they voted on the masks, the next day it was optional. Don't know why you're waiting until the 28th. I'm asking you to really reconsider your vote again and take your stipulations out, because if not, as a board, as a superintendent, and individual board members, you could all be looking at some serious lawsuits. And I'm going to spend the rest of my time because there actually is a lawyer here. So, thanks.
Thanks, Stephen. The next comment is from Ben Tull.
Good evening, members of the board, Mr. Carey. My name is Ben Tull. I am a resident of Westmont, and my son attends Manning. I am also an attorney. I would first like to say here what I am not here to discuss. I am not here to debate or comment upon whether it is a good idea to make school children wear masks or not. Rather, I'm here to talk about whether this board has the power under Illinois law to make that decision and enforce that policy in the wake of recent litigation. As you know, when this board makes a decision regarding particular policy, it needs to consider two issues. First, whether it has the legal authority to make such a decision, and second, whether this policy is a good idea or not. If the answer to the first question is no, then you never reach the second question. If you can't do it legally, you just can't do it at all. And that is the question that I'm here to discuss tonight. As you've heard by now, the appellate court recently ruled that the governor's emergency order imposing the mask mandate is no longer in effect. Some school districts have read this decision as authorizing them to adopt whatever masking and quarantine policies they want, including up to and including continuing to enforce masking rules. In my opinion, this is a misinterpretation of the appellate court's opinion. You see, neither court has ever ruled on the issue of whether school districts retained any independent power to enforce their own masking and quarantine policies. And in her opinion, Judge Grisho explicitly said, those issues are not before the court at this time. Some folks have interpreted this as a win for the school districts, but it's not. They just didn't lose on this issue yet. Not losing is not the same thing as winning. And there is every reason to believe that if this school district enforces the proposed policy, it will lose. And it will lose for all the same reasons that the governor lost his case. You see, the Illinois Department of Public Health has exclusive jurisdiction over anything to do with quarantine orders or partial quarantine measures, which includes devices for preventing infection, such as masks and vaccines. When an administrative agency has exclusive jurisdiction over a specific subject matter area, then no other governmental body, such as this school board, can enact any policy governing that subject without that agency's say-so. Now, Illinois law does say that the IDPH can delegate that authority, but only to local public health departments. Governor Pritzker's now defunct emergency order tried to get around this problem by ordering IDPH to delegate its power to local school districts. But that doesn't work, and it didn't fly with the trial court. Because the Department of Public Health is prohibited by law from delegating that power to anyone who is not a local public health department. And this board is not a local public health department. Pardon me. As a result, any rule or order that this board issues with respect to quarantining students, enforcing masking, or anything similar is void. Now, there was some talk during the last board meeting about how the board didn't adopt its COVID mitigation policy in response to the governor's emergency order, but rather passed it beforehand. And somehow this fact was supposed to make this board's policy less vulnerable to legal attack. I disagree. I don't think the board should take any comfort in that fact. The truth is, if the IDPH has always had exclusive jurisdiction to enact COVID mitigations, then any action that the board took on that subject was null and void, regardless of when it took place. If this matter goes to litigation, and I have it on good authority that it will, this board will find itself reduced to the absurd position of having to argue that IDPH doesn't have exclusive jurisdiction because masks aren't devices to prevent infection. Seriously, this is your best defense. So I ask you, at your deposition, when the plaintiff's attorney asks each of you whether you think a mask is a useful tool for preventing COVID infection, what are you going to say? If you say yes, you lose the case. If you say no, then that plaintiff's attorney is going to roll the tape and show you where you did say that, just that, at one of the previous board meetings. And you're also going to have to explain to parents why you think their kids should keep wearing masks, even though you testified that you don't believe masks are useful tools for preventing infection. Again, let me reiterate, this is your best defense. All the rest are worse. Maybe you would have better arguments available if Governor Pritzker had passed a law through the legislature affirmatively giving school boards the legal authority to enforce those rules, but he didn't do that. Instead, he issued an emergency order 18 months into the pandemic and after the General Assembly was already back in session. Now that order has been invalidated, and whatever fig leaf of authority this board once had as a result of that order has been stripped away. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ben. The next comment is from Dan Barrett.
Hi all, thank you for your time to let me speak tonight. My name is Dan Barrett. I'm a lifetime resident of Westmont, used to be the Bestmont, also a Westmont High School alumni. I have 3 kids in this district, one about to graduate, and I do know that things are not up for debate tonight as usual. I know a lot of you are just going to sit there with a blank stare, but this story needs to be told as the story is still continuing, and I'll try not to put you to sleep. This story is about a student that's basically had his entire normal version of a high school taken away from him with this virus, and that many still seem to know very little about and or refuse to acknowledge the truth that lies right in front of their eyes. My biggest problem comes with how the masking is getting enforced at our schools. I understand in 5th grade we have a teacher that draws a name out of a hat to be mask police. Putting a child in charge of judging other children's masks and how they're wearing them and whatnot, and then making that child comply before they go and tell their teacher. Why on earth would you put a child in charge of such a thing? And then, I also understand, this just drives me crazy. I also understand at the high school, if a kid doesn't mask properly or feel they should wear it at all, they have the option of going to solitary confinement or comply and go back to class. The same student nearly had his lunch taken away from him the other day. For having his mask down in the lunch line. He refused to put it back on because he was about to sit down and eat anyway, and ended up back in solitary and was told, "You already had your chance." And I say nearly lost his lunch because his dad had to write a pretty stern email to the school before they changed their tune suddenly and offering to bring him a lunch within minutes after that note went through. The further you zoom out on the big picture of this, the more insane Westmont schools are looking. We're nearing the end of these mitigations. The light is at the end of the tunnel. We're kicking the can down the road further. I think I saw today 83% of Illinois schools are now optional, and 201 is now in the final 17% with strict policies. I understand you're all doing your best to navigate through this, but at what point can students and parents use that same type of gray area mentality to choose what's best for themselves and their kids? Parents have covered all the statistics the last few meetings, current and future mental illness probabilities, suicide rates, speech delays. I can go on and on. One of you even brought up possible future of bullying in the equation when the masks come off. That works both ways. I know. The fifth grade daughter they were talking about 2 weeks ago, that was my daughter. The type of mask she was wearing, she got called a Trump lover and whatever. I mean, that's not even what this is about. Bullying it's a two-way road. And this same student earlier I was mentioning from the high school has already taken flack from a fellow student to put his mask back on. I'm sure you've guessed by now that student is my son. I'm proud to be his dad, standing up to this insanity. He's a 17-year-old boy standing up to this. More heart and soul in a 17-year-old than I could add up in this room. The fact of the matter is, you're doing this all the wrong way by not taking all factors into consideration while drawing up your own guidelines and mitigation plans. It does not cover the full spectrum of what we are up against. And I'm not even going into the civil rights violations you're all towing the line with in this giant gray area reasoning to keep things in place. These areas may be gray to you, but we, the parents, we see what's going on here crystal clear. Enough is enough. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, that concludes public comment. We'll now move into the consent agenda. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. Number 1, approval of February 2022 expenditure report. And number 2, ratification of January 2022 regular payroll.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Ms. Redonio?
Yes.
Ms. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Steckity?
Yes.
Ms. Conover?
Yes.
Mr. Marin?
Yes.
Ms. Coyle?
Yes.
Mr. Avia?
Yes.
Okay. Let's now move into information and discussion. The first item on the agenda is the superintendent search, and we have a guest here to make a presentation on that.
Thank you, Madam President.
Hello.
Good evening, Board. Gary. My name is Al Mulby, and I'm with the Illinois Association of School Boards, and I've been invited tonight to come and give you a little overview of the superintendent search process. And so I'd like to share a little bit about the School Board Association's role in that kind of a process and a little bit of my experience and maybe answer a few questions for you. I provided you a folder that should be at your place. It's kind of a modified version of the material that we present to boards of education when we do superintendent searches or present to do a superintendent search. So I'll kind of refer to this a little bit, but just a real quick background on myself. I've been with the School Board Association for 7 years now, working with districts primarily in the suburban area in the Executive Search Division of the School Board Association, of which you are a member. The Executive Search Division works with boards of education to conduct primarily superintendent searches. We also do other administrative searches, such as assistant superintendents, business managers, principals, executive directors for special ed co-ops, and so on. But most of our work is done with school boards who are seeking a new superintendent. And the search process is one that is very valuable to you as a Board of Education, because obviously that's your main responsibility, is to hire the superintendent, and we all know that. I'm a retired superintendent. I was a superintendent for 15 years in suburban Cook County, and I retired 7 years ago and started working with the School Board Association in this capacity. We have, as an association, we have 7 consultants that do the same thing that I do. We have 5 that work out of the Springfield office of IASB, and myself and another consultant work out of the Lombard office, primarily working with districts in the northern part of the state and primarily in the suburban area, but we work together in the search process. We all work as consultants, as a team, in carrying out the search process. So what I'd like to do is just kind of give you a real quick overview of how the process would work for a Board of Education should you decide that you want to conduct a superintendent search down the road upon the retirement of the superintendent. And then also maybe answer just a few questions you might have about that and give you kind of a projected timeline about what you might be looking at in the next basically year and a half that we'd be moving ahead until a new superintendent would be coming into the district. So,
And Al, just real quickly before you continue,
Sure.
I just for the good of the public listening to the meeting and those present here, I just want to make sure everyone is aware that Kevin has submitted his retirement. Kevin will be retiring after last year. So the reason we have Al here tonight to speak, next year, sorry, not last year, next year. The reason we have Al here tonight speaking to us is so that, as Al mentioned, one of, well, really the board's most critical job is to hire a superintendent. And so Al is here to help us learn about that process and get it started.
thank you, I appreciate that. What I've provided for you in the folder gives you a little bit of an overview. The left side of the folder that I gave to you has 2 brochures. One is about the School Board Association's Executive Search Department itself, and it kind of gives a real quick overview about how and why we work as we do. We've been, my goal is not to do a sales pitch for the School Board Association tonight, although I told Kevin I'd really try to scale it down a little bit. But it does give you an overview about how we work as an association, as a search firm. There's also another brochure that gives you a national perspective on an organization that we're a part of and conducting superintendent searches that kind of gives us a nationwide reach into the pool of candidates for superintendent positions. On the right side of the folder is a real step-by-step overview of our process. And I will say it's pretty much the same process for any of the private for-profit firms as well as for us in terms of working through the superintendent search process itself. And I won't go through this for you, but it's something you might want to get a chance to look at on your own. But it kind of tells you how we go about from the beginning all the way through until after the new superintendent is employed, and what we do to work with you and serve you as a school board association after you've hired a new superintendent. There's also, at the back of that stapled piece on the right, there's a kind of a graphic that's called our proven pyramid on page 5. Kind of gives you a real visual overview of the process of the superintendent search. And then on the last page of the stapled piece is a projected timeline with the various steps and what could be included in your process should you decide to do that. And really the first piece that you have to think about is, do you want to hire an outside agency to do the search for you? And there's a lot of advantages to that. The networks that there are in terms of attracting a pool of candidates can be very beneficial and advantageous for you to use an outside firm. And again, just speaking from this School Board Association's perspective, I know that it's a very tedious task for a Board of Education to do this. It's a lot of work to conduct a very quality search. And we work with you to make sure that it's a quality, comprehensive search. And again, that's kind of the role of any firm, is to make sure that they do the grunt work for you in this task. The time frame that you're looking at from now or up until the time in which a new superintendent would take their seat, which would be July 1st of 23. That's a very good amount of time to begin thinking about and getting started in the process should you decide to do that. And I think that what we're finding right now from my own experience with IASB is a lot of districts are looking ahead to that same time frame that Mr. Carey has in place as far as his retirement and looking to have somebody in place on July 1st of '23. They're starting to think about the process now, and probably the best time to then become pretty active in the process as a Board of Education would be towards the end of summer or right when school resumes and people start coming back and getting back into the mindset of school in the early fall, because that's when we would be able to work with public groups, stakeholder groups, putting together a profile, putting together the announcement of vacancy, doing surveys and doing focus groups on getting input into the profile of your next superintendent. We usually look at about a 4-month time frame for the actual search itself. From the time these early steps are in place with the surveys and putting together the brochure, getting it out there and getting it advertised through the variety of job sites that we utilize to promote the positions, all the way through until the application is open. It's an online electronic application process until the screening interview point, until the initial interviews on the part of the board, until the final interviews. We usually see it's about, a good search usually takes about 4 months from start to finish. At that ending point, we don't just end it when you sign the contract with your next superintendent. The School Board Association, as your association, does some follow-up work for you, and should you decide that that would be a direction you might want to consider, I'd be more than happy to come back and talk to you more about that later on in terms of the School Board Association's perspective on a superintendent search. It's something that, like I said, it's a hard process. And when I was a superintendent and I was retiring, I saw the School Board Association work with my board as they were making that transition to hire a new superintendent. And I got a lot of respect for the School Board Association's process at that point. But again, I'd be happy to come back and talk to you more about that at another time. If I can answer any real brief questions here tonight, I don't know how in-depth in questions you want to go tonight, Madam President, but I'd be happy to answer any real quick questions. And like I'd indicated to Mr. Carey, when it comes time that you feel like you want to look at the possibility of utilizing a firm such as the School Board Association, I'd be happy to come back and give you a much more in-depth description of how we work with boards to make it a very successful process and share with you a lot more information at that time.
I have a question or two here.
Yes, sir.
First thing, the 4 months that you're describing starts with step 2, if I'm understanding, in the document you provided, which is announcing and advertising the vacancy. From the time you announce and advertise for the vacancy to the time that you sign a contract with the superintendent, you're guesstimating at around 4 months.
About a 4 month. Usually, that's what we're seeing is about a 4-month time frame now.
So 2 questions about that. One would be, if our time frame for having someone in the chair is July 1st, we should count backwards 4 months-ish from that time frame. Or is there a time between the time that decision is made and when that person starts in the role that we should also be taking into consideration?
That's a great question. I think what we see is probably being most beneficial to a board would be to look at likely being able to employ their next superintendent before the holiday time, because that does a variety of things. You get first crack at the best candidates, basically, is one of them. And also then, if you've completed the hiring process and you have your new person in place by the holidays or soon thereafter, that gives a few months then of transitioning for that next person to be able to arrange to meet with Mr. Carey, meet with other administrators, and be able to come in and kind of get into the flow of becoming your next superintendent.
And by the holidays, just to clarify, you mean by the end of the year? You mean by
the end of a calendar year, right? So we usually see districts usually starting actively being involved in the search process around the end of August and taking it through the fall into the early winter, and being able to. We actually see most employments of new superintendents are done either in December or January board meetings. And I think boards are very comfortable with that because they feel like, okay, that big hurdle has been crossed and now they can move into
focus on
the transition in time.
So that answers the question about what comes after the 4-month period. How much time comes before the 4-month period typically in terms of developing timeline and criteria, which is the one thing that I think I want to make sure we have plenty of time for developing criteria. So what do, because I think I heard you mention a couple of things that we might do before then. How much time would you expect that a board might allot for that?
That initial step, we usually allow about a 3 to 4 week time frame. That usually, from the way we do it, we have surveys that we do for the community, the stakeholders, the staff. I do individual interviews with board members to get their perspectives on the next superintendent and what they'd like to see, strengths of the district and so on. And then we also can do stakeholder focus groups where I would host these meetings with parents and staff and anybody else from the community who would want to come in and talk about the district itself and what they'd like to see in the next superintendent. All of that together goes into putting together the profile, the advertisement, you know, however you want to call it, the announcement of vacancy brochure, and that we usually figure about a 3 to 4 week period for that right at the beginning. Early fall is usually the best because people are in back to school mode and they're thinking about it. Some boards, you know, want me to come like even in the summertime and get started then, but sometimes you're going to get a lot better responses on surveys in terms of response rate if everybody's in the mode of doing that. And so early fall is doing that. Late August is a good time to really begin that piece of the process. The application itself, we usually keep open. It's an online application that's pretty, I don't want to say it's easy to do, but it's much more user-friendly than it used to be. And usually keeping it open for about a 5 to 6 week period is enough to generate a very solid pool of candidates. And most applicants know right away when you employ a firm, and if you were to employ us, we post that vacancy right away so that anybody who is a recipient of our email blast, and we put it on our website, IASA's website, the job bank, even while we're putting together that brochure, they automatically know that the application is open because we're doing the search. And so that initiates that piece of the process. The interviewing piece at the end, usually, you know, boards, we see them wanting to allow at least about maybe a 3 week period for interviewing, initial interviews, which are usually done just by the board of the slate of candidates, and then final interviews. If you invite 2, maybe 3 finalists back for a final interview, those are usually done on individual days and evenings, and that takes a little bit longer. So about a 3 week period for the interviewing piece. And sometimes the interviewing piece is the hardest step because you got to have all 7 board members together for all these interviews, and it can be a challenge. But
Sure. And one last question, and then whoever else. Do you know of either the ISB or any other private companies that do the searches? Will you ever break up that, I'm going to call it a project, will you ever break that project up to where that first stage of developing the needs and everything, where you might do that further in advance and then circle back to the rest of the process, or do you, the ISB or any of the companies you know, do you tend to run through the whole thing all together at once?
sure.
I'm asking that question because I think one of the things that we've talked about at this board is the need to make sure that we're communicating and engaged with the community. And to me, honestly, 1 month feels too short, and I don't expect that the search company or ASB that we would work with would be engaged for that long. But I think that we might want to engage with the community longer than that.
Right. And that's certainly something that we have done and could certainly do. I would structure that initial piece around whatever the board feels the best needs are in terms of gathering that information, meeting with the public, meeting with the stakeholders, and collecting and getting that thought process going. And starting it as soon as you would want to do would certainly be very doable.
Yeah.
Basically, kind of the bottom line is that my job is to make sure the board knows it's your search. And however you as a board, with my guidance, feel is the best way to approach the community, the staff, the stakeholders, that's the way we would go. And I would structure that to be in the most conducive way possible for you as a board.
Thanks.
So I'm wondering, I think Carlos, to kind of hook onto that, I'm less concerned about once we actually get the posting done and that process, right? The 4-month process of actually hiring. And I think probably the majority of the board members here would agree that yes, our biggest concern is how we get good information from the community as much as everybody loves a survey, or loves to hate a survey, survey responses are not high, and we've not traditionally seen a high percentage of survey responses, despite our desire to get some consistent feedback. What are some other ways that you guys have utilized to get stakeholder feedback beyond, the board members, but the community stakeholder information and feedback to help guide our search? What are some other ways besides the kind of super standard survey, right, in an email or posting it?
Sure. We find that probably for a district like ours, like this, I think it's very, very productive to have focus group meetings where I would actually, myself and probably another consultant, would host these meetings and invite groups of people together, have some discussion about what they see as the strengths of the district, the concerns, long-range concerns, what they'd like to see in the next superintendent, and basically collect and gather the information in that way. I think that we find that as being very valuable for then boards, because then I would provide that information back to you as a board on what was gleaned from these meetings with the public, with the stakeholders, as well as results from surveys. And you're right, surveys can, the response rate, hopefully you get what you would like to have. The surveys can be structured however you'd like to see it in terms of types of questions, open comments, whatever you might want. They're online surveys, but they're not scientific, and I know that. Sometimes people just like the fact that they've been asked, and that's kind of good, but I think that the focus groups at the beginning of the process can be much more valuable. And so I think in answer to your question, we see that as probably one of the most effective, especially for this isn't a big district, but it's a district this size, it could be very valuable. I know the community very well, and I think that knowing the community, knowing the school community, getting the information that you'd like to have as a board as you move on ahead in the process could be gathered very successfully from these types of meetings.
Okay, and as a follow-up to that, how do you get the how do you get it out there, right? We've got focus groups coming up. Is it email blasts? Is it flyers? What is it that can get into the most hands so that we get the most?
We do it a variety of different ways based on how you see as being most effective. You're getting people together in a productive way. It can be done through invitation. It can be done through just an open, we're having a focus group meetings, but sometimes that's not best because you could get a group of people without a lot of opportunity for good individual or face-to-face discussion. Generally, we like to see them broken into maybe groups of 10 to 15 people throughout the course of a day or 2 days, scheduled throughout that day. If it's staff, I've met with staff after school sometimes, and they'll come to the focus group meetings, parents then in the evenings and also during the day, just a variety of different ways. They can be hand-picked people if you feel that that's going to be most effective, or it can just be opened up to whoever you'd like to have. I've scheduled meetings with business and local officials as one time during the day, followed by a group of staff members, followed by a group of parents, followed by a group of students. And so there's a variety of different ways you can do that. And we can talk through that if that becomes a piece of the process that you'd like to include, should you decide to use us.
Thank you. And a follow-up for Mr. Carey, what's the status of our SIP teams at the schools? Because I know that the COVID elephant in the room put some challenges towards the SIP meetings. Do we have a SIP team, a parent, SIP team at all of our schools that we could go to support us with this? Because that's kind of one of the ways that I think of, right? When we talk about
Right. Currently at the elementary level, we do have parent involvement in the SIP teams, but not at the junior high or high school level.
Have we had it at the junior high before?
We've had, the junior high, it's been more through the PTO.
Okay.
That doubles as that function. The high school, we have not had that at the high school.
Okay. Might be something to put on our administrator's radar for, yeah. Okay, thank you.
I have a question about making that initial start.
I'm sorry, making that initial?
Making that initial start, what your advice on what we should be considering as we think about how we want to do the search. And I know you mentioned on your own, which scares me most, or using different firms.
Sure.
What is your advice that we should consider besides cost? I know that's a big probably a big determinant, but what else, what other things should we consider as we make the decision, how and who we use
Sure.
to help us?
I think, and trying to obviously speak as fairly as I can here, I think cost is a factor, and it's a fiscal decision on the part of a board. And as a former superintendent, I know that for sure. And I think that that's something that there's an advantage to the association as opposed to firms, but all the firms, they all do a good job, and I think that that's a key thing too. I think as you look at that, the difference now compared to searches that were done 5 to 10 years ago, all of the pools that a for-profit firm or us as IASB have is going to be about the same pool of candidates we're finding, because it's all done electronically. It's all, all the postings are done electronically and applying digitally, and so everybody knows the vacancies that are there. It's just a matter of who's doing the paperwork and who's doing the most effective, comprehensive work in the internal pieces of the search. And so I think that's a great question. And if you're to look at an outside firm, a lot of boards will, have, different firms do presentations, and you kind of then have to make your decision on who you like best and what factors then strike you as a board as being most effective. We find that the pool of candidates that we're drawing is the same size, and it's basically the same pool of candidates that the for-profit firms are drawing now too as well. And I'm being real honest about that. I think that's pretty much the same candidates. The recruiting is done differently, but at the same time, with the network of job sites that is out there now, the electronic network of job sites and posting vacancies, I mean, it's very, very easily done to get your vacancy posted on something that's going to reach all 50 states and all the organizations that candidates will look at and work through to find the vacancies. So, I'd like to think that the personal touch that that you want to have with your consultant is going to be a vital part of your decision making, and being able to work with you as a board and work with the community, and hopefully develop a knowledge of what the community wants and what you as a board want. And I think that those are key things you want to look at as you're looking at the possibility of hiring an outside firm to do this process. We as an association, boards, sometimes they'll choose to do it on their own. And a lot of, throughout the state, there's a lot of boards that do these searches for themselves. The bigger the district, the more in more of a suburban and urban area, you find less boards really want to do that, because it's a pretty time-consuming and challenging endeavor. And I'm saying that very honestly too. And I think that we do the majority of the searches that are done in the state of Illinois by somebody other than a Board of Education. We do the majority of them. And I think that, like I said, all the firms, they do a good job. It's just a matter of what you think is going to best meet your needs as a board and a community, and how well that firm is going to get to know your community and what the needs are as you look at your next superintendent.
So Al, Dina, did you have other questions?
No.
Okay. I'll just jump in with a few. So Al, I guess, as you were talking about the different ways boards can go about doing this, this is the most important thing this board will do over the next year and a half, without a doubt, the most important thing. And I think it's really, really critical for us to find, it's all about finding a match, right?
Yep.
And I think that, what I'm really curious, if you have any knowledge or statistics or information you can share with us about the success rates of
Just
boards.
happen to have that information.
Okay. Like of boards who have tried to do this on their own versus boards who have used, private firms or for-profit firms,
Right.
versus boards that have used the IASB. I think, it would help us, I think, to know whether it's longevity or, however you measure success for
Right. positions
like this. But long-term fit with the district, I think, is probably one of our metrics for success.
I think it is, and I think it's probably the best way that boards want to look at it in terms of, what's our success rate, for lack of a better term, and it is a longevity rate. And we know that, of the searches that we've done, and again, I don't mean to be making a sales pitch, because that's not why I'm here tonight, but the searches that we've done, we have a very high percentage of superintendents, even after their third year, which would basically be a first contract, that are still in that position. Generally, we're looking at around in the high 80% success rate. And I think that all the other firms are going to be able to tell you similar types of things. I don't really know exactly how that would compare to boards doing it themselves, but I think that, probably very similar to. I think that the biggest difference is being able to draw the pool and reach out to the pool that you want to have, and also then be able to do all of these other pieces that can fall into the process itself to do it successfully, and really let the board just ultimately be the decision makers at the end of the process. But again, that's something that you as a board have to decide how you want to go about this from this point on.
Thank you.
Do
Any
we
other
have
questions?
to do a bid process for this, like we would for?
No, you don't have to do a bid process. If you wanted to interview firms, we could reach out to different firms and they could come to a board meeting and the board could interview. They could do a presentation and then the board could ask their questions and decide on a firm if you'd like to do it.
I can help you with that.
Can we get like a, before deciding if we're gonna go into an interview, wow, it's a lot of interviews. Can we just get some pricing from some other organizations, just like because I'm thinking backwards. We have maybe 4 meetings before the school year ends. We have 1 meeting in March. We have 4 meetings maybe before the school year ends, and then we only meet once a month over the summer. And if we wanted to start gathering input from the community before the school year ends, before everybody leaves for summer break, that's kind of where, I don't know, is that where everybody else's like timeline head is at? Or would you guys prefer, is everybody thinking more like fall?
Mm-hmm. Let me ask Al a quick question. When you said it takes 4 months, approximately,
generally from start
speaking,
to finish, yes.
So that was from posting?
That would be from the time that you would employ us to start the process. From that point on, where we start generating, survey information and interview with you as a board, where I would be interviewing with you individually, and also then working with the community groups and stakeholder groups at the beginning, all the way through till the board actually, conducts a site visit of their next superintendent's current place of employment, assuming that you get to that point and you want to go visit his or her district, which is usually the culminating decision-making point. Usually about a 4 to, it could be longer, but generally about a 4-month time frame, yes.
So from your experience, starting the process entirely in August,
I would say,
including surveying the public. Right. I mean, obviously we have to choose how we're going to go about this, but we want to have a firm selected if we're using a firm,
Yeah.
and then start the process in August.
Yeah, and I think that, as the gentleman here indicated, the possibility of maybe looking at gathering some of that initial information earlier than that's certainly doable too. But I think I'm comfortable in the searches that I do. I'm very comfortable in getting started at the end of August with all of the pieces, and generally it's, that's a great time. Sometimes too, the candidates, if you start, you can also start too soon, where you already get it going here, and somebody, that best fit, isn't necessarily ready to make a commitment to leave their current district yet. And that's something we find too. It kind of goes in waves. It's almost a domino effect with, when somebody leaves, that creates a position somewhere else and somewhere else and so on. And so I think that, the timing can be kind of critical in terms of starting, and everybody who knows that they're going to be looking for another position, or maybe, their board hasn't extended them, beyond where they're at now, and so they know they're going to be looking. Or somebody who's not a superintendent yet, but is an assistant superintendent who's ready to move into that position. They know generally by the end of a summertime that they're ready to start actively looking come early fall. And so that's kind of a key part there too. So I find that we've been very successful in that late summer, early fall beginning point.
So my concern is not so much about when to post. My concern is about getting the information from the public and making sure that we do our history. If we look at the last couple of years, is to move very slowly and get inconsistent feedback, and not a ton of feedback. And I really want to make sure that the information, I think the most important thing to me is that the information from the community For us to be able to decide what we put in that posting and who we're really looking for feels like the most important part of it. And I'm concerned if we start that in August, that we're not gonna get enough information, and now we have not left ourselves enough time to, like, not post before, now it's too late. Or not too late, but now we're posting in December or something.
Right.
That's my concern. My concern is we don't traditionally move very quickly. And we need to be able to communicate really well this piece of it, and that's in our challenges there.
Yeah, Leah, I hear you. I totally agree. I guess where I'm seeing a difference is that that's kind of the purpose of hiring an outside group to do that for us. And what I'm hearing from Al sounds really promising in terms of setting up focus groups with a variety of stakeholders. And so I'm less nervous, I guess, about that than maybe some others. I think we'll be okay if we start in August. I think that our next immediate step is to just see if we want to compare IASB with any private for-profit firms and just set a deadline for deciding who we're going to work with.
Yeah.
And I think too, there's one more point about that, and those are both very good comments, but having been a superintendent and knowing when the fall is such a key point to be able to get a feeling of, okay, what's the school year going to be like and so on. People are back, and I think that's a really good time to be able to generate the feedback that you're hoping for, the amount of feedback, probably even better than later on in the year, because that's when you're going to be able you can get information out at open houses, curriculum nights, things like that are taking place right early on in the year, and be able to meet with some of these groups, booster clubs and so on, that are meeting early on to get information to them if that were a part of it too. So I think that's a key thing. And it doesn't take a long time to then generate the information for you as a board. I mean, it's relatively easy to do that now. The surveys, like an online survey, we have a link that we make available to the community through the district can send that out. It's an online survey that's done very quickly and easily. And that can be, we usually keep that open for about 2 weeks. And like I said, it's not scientific. And if you promote it and continue to promote it and promote it again, you're going to get a pretty, you'll be able to maximize your response rate as best you can hope for, I think. But these other types of input gathering features can really play a strong part in the fall, especially too. But again, there's not a right answer. Just what I find as being most successful for districts. And again, there is a point where I think that gathering that information can be generated most successfully when people are really excited about the school year. And I think that's
Yeah, I agree with you. The fall, to me, seems like the time
right.
most people are excited about the school year. As it moves on later in the year, less excitement. Summertime, people are traveling, and not around, so.
And by that time too, almost everybody in the school community is going to know that Mr. Carey is going to be retiring. And so I think that's a key thing too. You don't want them to say, well, what's happening to the current superintendent kind of thing. You want that information to be generated in the most positive way possible for you as a board. And therefore, and now this gives us the opportunity as a board and as a community to now look at new leadership. And that's how we promote it to the community and to the staff.
Have you had success getting feedback from like the community but non-parents?
We have actually, depending on how we go about, again, inviting them to for example, the focus groups. And I think, and I'll put in another plug here. I think knowledge of the community is going to be very significant here, and being able to know that the Chamber of Commerce and some of these other entities have a stake. They are stakeholders, and they want to be included as stakeholders. And I recognize that, truly. And I think that being able to get into these groups and invite them and invite their input will be key. And I think knowing the right way to do it and who you want to include is a big step. And I can certainly help you with that.
Great.
Al, you've been really generous with your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I think the board has to have some conversations. We can continue discussing tonight a little bit, or we can move on to the rest of the agenda and put it on our next agenda.
But I just wanted to thank you, Al,
Absolutely.
and thank you for your time.
Well, I appreciate being invited, and I'd be more than happy to come back and do it in a much broader perspective, you know, a sales pitch, if you will, but really an education opportunity for you to know some of the more in-depth details about how to make it work for you as a board. I'd be happy to do that, so.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for inviting me, I appreciate, and I really appreciate what you guys do. I truly do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Al. So, fellow board members, can we have this on the next agenda for discussion so that we can determine, you know, we do have to make the first decision, which is firm, no firm. And then from there, how many firms do we want to look at before we make a decision?
What are the
to move
action
forward?
items that are needed here?
For action, the action item would be approving an agreement with a firm.
Okay, so not necessarily do we want to use a firm or not, but,
No, that would be a board
Actual-
discussion. You can reach
Okay.
consensus on that.
okay.
And then if you decide to interview firms, or if you just want Mr. Mobley to come back and get more information on the Illinois Associated School Board. But eventually, there would be an agreement that would be drawn up that the board would review, and you would take action on the agreement.
Where do we get more information on other firms?
I can reach out and get information on it.
I mean, it was wonderful. I just feel like due
No,
diligence.
as
to
you said,
compare
there's
this
about
to comparable.
Comparison.
Yeah.
About
you know.
4 firms
And
out there.
I feel like we've also already kind of talked about the fact that we do want to use a firm, unless I'm crazy, I don't know.
I
feel
mean,
like-
I'm happy to
Yeah.
just have that decision over with. I think we need a
At our
firm.
conference, I
Right.
think,
I agree.
So
at our conference, I think they had a presentation on that, and then there are multiple ones at the exhibits, so
Oh, great.
if there's an option, even to see who's available by our next meeting, and if that can be on the agenda, I think
right,
that's,
Yeah, that's what I was
not
gonna say.
in addition
great.
to the discussion.
Yeah.
I can get a little information on firms. Typically, they'll share their costs as well.
Oh.
And I could have that information for the board at the next board meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I think high-level costs would help us.
Well, even
Yeah.
if they
Yeah.
have,
Drastically at our
if
next
there's
meeting.
someone available, I don't think we need to have 4 here, but if there's someone available, and as we're looking, we have a couple weeks, a few weeks, to see if there's someone able to do a presentation. I think that's a good idea. So I guess that's something we're looking for
Yeah.
from you, if
I
that's
think-
possible.
Yeah, let me gather information on the firms, the board can review it, and then from that determine which firms you'd want to bring in.
Great. That sounds perfect. Thank you. Good discussion. The second item on the agenda is South School Early Childhood Program.
Hey, thanks, everybody. So I'm John Jonak, and I used to be the Westmont Junior High School principal. Thank you for making me the Director of Student Services, and I also got the Early Childhood Program as well. And so I'm here, and Mr. Carey had talked about to the administrators who would like to present on behalf of their schools on what different days. And so when he said I could present on February 22nd, 2022, I was pretty stoked because it's my lucky number is 222. So, you know, it worked out. Thank you for having me here. Also, thank you for your service to our community. I know Mr. Mulby, and he's actually not a bad administrator, but his wife was better. She was the one, sorry, Al. She was the one that ended up coming in when Amy had a maternity leave, and she helped me quite a bit. So it's really nice seeing them here as well. So can we get the presentation up on the screens? Awesome. Thank you so much. And so I'm here to talk a little bit about the early childhood program. And first, I want to say kudos to the families at South School, because as we're talking about parent feedback, already we've got 37% that have taken the 5 Essentials survey, and we haven't gotten more than 20% in the past. And so that's awesome. Thank you. And by the way, we're leading all the other schools, so in your face, other schools, no big deal. All right, so the early childhood program is over at South School, and we've got 2 blended programs, so that's preschool for all programs. So some of our students there are going to have an IEP, and some are not going to have an IEP. And then we also have another classroom of our the early childhood, and that is students with just IEP and higher needs. So typically we have about 15 students max per morning and then afternoon in those preschool for all classes. And then we have up to 8 students that would be in Mrs. Johnson's class. So our early childhood team, probably one of the best things about this appointment is that I've gotten the opportunity to meet so many other people in our district that I never would have met before. And so we have, you can rest assured, we have a very strong student service team. And I'm not just talking about self-school when I say that. Whether they're related services, whether we're working with SASSET as well, the case managers, the psychs, the speech and language pathologists, very, very strong. And so just know that as we're talking about special education as well. So the program's set up for 3 to 5-year-old students, and it's set up in the calendar so when we're not doing a preschool screening, they meet 5 days a week. And so once again, morning and afternoon classes, except for Julie's class, Miss Johnson's class, which is the entire day long. There's a tuition-based program as well, but that's currently on wait list because of the amount of students that we have in the programs. So speaking of the program, one of the ways that there's a metric of its success is through this Accelerate Illinois, sorry, drop that S. And so we've received, and this is not like a John Jonak thing, this is a Linda Clowder, and this is an early childhood program thing, but they've received the Gold Circle of Quality. And so they're judged on teaching and learning, they're judged on family and community engagement, leadership and management, qualifications, and continuing education. And they've had that golden seal for quite some time now. So you should be proud of that. The teachers should be proud of that, and the administration as well. So preschool screenings, it's really important. We have them four times in a year. The last one for this school year is April 7th, 2022. And so if we have some students out there that need to go through that screening, parents, you should know to call Mrs. Joanne Stefuk. Her number is 630-468-8015. It's in the presentation as well. And it's on our website. And so you can arrange an appointment to come in and do the preschool screening. It's pretty cool. I got to be a part of the last one, and they really, the teachers, the team, they run it. They know exactly what they're doing, which is good because I really don't.
Who should go to the preschool screenings? Like, what's the age range?
Yeah, so typically if we're going to have a student, it's for ages 3 to 5. So if you have a student that's kind of bordering on to that 2, kind of turning 3, that's around that period of time that they should be going. Also 3-year-olds, we have students that are 4 that have been through the most recent screening as well. And so typically what they'll identify is they'll look at their, well, I'm going to go through this, I guess, but they'll look at their gross, their motor, speech and language, cognitive, and then they start determining, okay, is this young man, young lady here, are they at risk in any sort of ways? Is there a reason to bring the student and the family in and have conversations about what the parents are perceiving, or what the team has been perceiving, and have those conversations to see if they're eligible for an IEP, an individual education plan, or whether that is through speech and language or developmental delay or another category that we may have. And so it's kind of the screening process occurs, and then there can be a deeper dive depending on if the team believes that there is a need. There's a whole bunch of different risk factors that are associated. It's not just necessarily about the cognitive ability or the fine or the gross motor skills. It's not just that. There's some criteria. I don't have it all mastered, but.
So it's kind of meant to, like, if I'm understanding, because my son went to South, but we were part of early intervention. So going to South was like, this is just what you do when you're
pretty smooth transition.
Right? So I didn't have to, he already had developmental delays from being part of early intervention. So he already, so it's kind of meant to like catch the kids who.
You got it.
Who are not part of early intervention, but might need an IEP or a little higher risk for needing an IEP.
Absolutely, and similar to you, Leah, my daughter she was caught that same way. So she was early intervention at first, and then she just started going in, and it was for speech and language, and continues to be. So it's awesome when they're noted in early intervention, but this screening process is, sometimes parents are, and we only know, we know what we know, we don't know what we don't know, right? And so especially newer parents that maybe are like, just something doesn't seem right. Well, this is an opportunity for them to come in, and we've got speech paths, we've got psychs, we've got teachers, they're all part of this screening process. And so it's a really great opportunity to get a good idea of where your child is at.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for sharing that as well. All right, so let's get going and talk a little bit about some of the examples of learning that go on at South School. And there tends to be very active exploration. Sometimes that is led by the team of teachers, and sometimes that is going to be just focused on the student. The student is going to be the one that's learning through their own exploration. So the Westmont, South School and the area of Westmont, they really work well together in bringing community into the school and then going out and seeing the community as well. So Miss Adrian is from Westmont Public Library, and my first exposure to Miss Adrian was that the EC team came to me and was like, don't you know, today we have Westmont Public Library. You need to move your car from your awesome parking spot and get it out of there so that Miss Adrian can pull up. I'm like, yeah, okay, sorry. Didn't even put my coffee down yet, and I ran out there and I moved my car. So Miss Adrian comes out and she reads to the students, and they have different conversations. And it's awesome, and it's well worth me moving my car, by the way. Ms. Adrian, you can take my spot anytime. Westmont Fire Department also came out. They're amazing with our students. They're amazing in times of crisis as well. But they came out, and there was an in-school field trip this year. I believe it was around December. I could be wrong, though. But the students were able to go around and tour the vehicles and talk to the firemen. And really get an idea for what the job that they do. They were awesome with the students, and they also got one of those red hats at the end, which was a big win. I didn't get one, but that's okay. They got to try on the fireman gear, practice pumping and spraying water, and then they got that hat that I talked about. All right, so trick or treat is like the most treasured day of the year for our little ones. They like going to the offices at South. I missed this. I was still working at Westmont Junior High School when this occurred. But this is an opportunity, and everything is kind of tied into teaching students different things along the way. And so the kids were practicing their language skills and their manners by saying thank you. And then they saw the familiar adults and then some unfamiliar adults and how to interact regarding who they're talking to. They did get non-food treats. I don't know if those were any good because they were non-food. Were those any good, Mr. Carey?
Oh, they were great.
What were they? What were they?
I know what mine was. Mine were little rubber duckies.
Rubber duckies. Okay. Anybody else?
Those are rubber duckies.
Do you even remember, Kim? No? Okay.
Something
All right, so we had
Halloween
rubber
themed.
duckies. I still like the dark Milky Way bars, but whatever. But I guess the students really enjoyed it, and that is what matters. Mr. Troyer is the Westmont Junior High School music teacher, chorus teacher, and I love it because he ends up coming every Friday, sometimes Thursday and Friday. I don't know his exact schedule, but he ends up meeting with the students. And so they have that opportunity to work with him, to work on identifying pitch, moving their bodies to the beat, dancing with scarves, and playing instruments with some fun songs. So Mr. Troyer is awesome. He's got 3 little girls himself. Maybe they're not so little anymore. And so he's awesome with them. And Emmy decided that she was going to go hang out with him one day. She heard his voice and ran downstairs. The students weren't exactly ready for Emmy that day, but not too many people traumatized. We'll be okay. Speaking about trauma, that's not the kids laying down because Emmy came in. That was actually working with the Salt Creek Ballet having conversations about deep breathing techniques and relaxation. And so Miss Kelly from Salt Creek came out with Miss Johnson's class and worked with them. So there's a lot of creative play that occurs in the classrooms, and this is what these pictures are all about. what the students are doing, whether they're carving, whether they're carving different things or whether they're on the playground. The gymnasium is fantastic. From what I understand, there's an area that the teachers fill up the vehicles with gas. This is make-believe, so don't worry. But they fill up with gas, and then in the top, in the center, that is a fast food restaurant, from what I understand. And so you can see there's a little bit of a backup there. It could be because there's, personnel shortage, a work shortage, or maybe they don't have all the materials that they need. Not quite sure, but they had a really good time doing this, and this is one of this is that play indoors, and then the students interacting with one another as well. That it all is education, right? It's all part of the learning process. I started talking about a little bit of cutting and carving and GUI. Well, this is working on these pumpkins. So during the pumpkin unit, Miss Deck's class helped scoop out the insides of the pumpkin. They counted the seeds. They used using one-to-one correspondence, and then carved a class pumpkin, which was on display during the week before Halloween. So pretty cool there. And I don't see any duckies in this, but there was candy that was collected for our troops overseas. And so I know, being one of those troops about 10, 15 years ago, I appreciated it when the good stuff came my way. And so thank you to the teachers for organizing this, and thank you to the students and the families. I'm pretty sure that a lot of those parents were perfectly fine in giving a lot of that candy up to the soldiers instead. So this is the letter of the week. So each day the preschool class learns about a letter of the week. So they practice identifying letter sounds, writing the uppercase, lowercase versions of the letter, and then they learn about vocabulary words that begin with whatever that letter is. And then they do a craft. They work at a small group table, and you can see one of our guys there, Gus, who I saw today during a speech lesson. He's painting J for jellyfish, and there's a craft going around throughout the table. So very nice job. This is pretty cool. So Mr. Carey said when the board appointed me that I was able to bring Emmy with me, which is awesome. And so we've already started incorporating Emmy, besides scaring the kids a little bit, incorporating Emmy into working with some of our students. And so one of our students specifically was struggling a little bit and just coming to school and getting into different habits. And so Miss Casey uses Emmy in regards to speech pathology and, getting that enunciation and sit and lay down and different commands. And so that works really well with the SLPs, speech language pathologists. And then also just getting into routines and bringing kids up and everybody, almost like a positive reinforcements for going through things and giving Emmy a treat and those sort of things. And Emmy loves it because she's not just sitting there on my floor and they're throwing the ball to her and having a good time, and she's really gentle with them. So it's been nice to be able to bring her. And then just some pictures from Valentine's Day. The teachers do this amazing job of incorporating the holidays into whatever is going on. You can see the sand pit there, and they've got a whole bunch of red that's in there for Valentine's Day. I've got to say, Miss Clowder, on her way out, she said to me that John, one of the best parts of the job is that, the EC teachers, and they just really know what's going on there. And they're low maintenance. They do great things for kids, and that's been obvious in my experience so far. So I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of the EC team. They are amazing. This opportunity's been really good for me, and I really appreciate being able to present to you. If you have questions, I'll take them. There's like a 1 in 10 shot that I probably don't know the answer to it, but I'll do my very best. Any questions?
John, thanks for your presentation. I don't have a question, just more of a comment. And I think, the entire country and maybe the entire world is talking about early childhood education and how important it is. And I think, we're doing an outstanding job in this community. I think what you've shown us today, we know that there's a lot of impact to what we're seeing here other than wonderful, happy, clearly smiling children who were able to be in school in person throughout this entire year and enjoy their education. And so just really appreciate that and the impact it's had on these kids.
Thank you. All right. Oh, yes.
Photo? Can I take a photo?
Oh,
For
certainly.
the Instagram? Thank you, John. I'm gonna have everybody come watch your
I'm
presentation.
smiling, just so you know. And I do want to say thanks, and I had it in the notes, but I passed by it, but it's really important. Ann stopped by, and it was in behalf of the larger community, and I understand that, but she stopped by, and typically, and I think this was brought up during the last board meeting, even though I wasn't here physically, I was watching the whole thing. And the EC teachers don't have a PTO. They don't have a booster club or anything like that. And it was, if you could have seen the look on their faces when they saw just all the snacks and the goodies and the coffee and they were so appreciative. And so just thank you for remembering them. Thank you for to the community and for you delivering. It meant a great deal to them, and so thank you.
Thanks,
John.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on the agenda is the update on the 2021-2022 school year.
Just give me a moment to pull it up. And every board meeting, I provide the board and community an update on our school year and how things are going. And again, we always, in case it's the first time members of our community are watching this for the first time, but we always start with our guiding principles, and these have been our guiding principles throughout the year. These have not changed, and so we want to make sure that we have a healthy and safe environment for our students and that we prioritize full-time in-person learning, and that's one of the things we've been able to accomplish all year long, is we've been able to stay in person. I make sure that we provide meaningful and engaging academic experiences. We address the social emotional needs of our students, and we have consistency and stability. And again, one of the key pieces is being able to stay in person and not having to pivot back and forth between remote and in person. And then we're continuing to provide professional development to our staff. DuPage County continues to be at a high level of transmission. Our new cases are 215 per 100,000, and the positivity rate is a little over 4%, but definitely improving. And you can look at the trend, our local positivity rates, and we keep dropping off a week as we add a week, but back in November, you can see where our percentages were, and then they started to spike around the holidays. You can see that now we're locally, we're coming down to as low as we were, dropping a little bit lower. Our local average is 4.78% now, and again, DuPage County is 4.15%. New cases per 100,000, those again are also on the decline, and our average now is 201 new cases locally, and then the DuPage County is 215. This is all since last Friday, these numbers. In terms of our own data for COVID-19, since our last board meeting, we've had one positive staff member, and we haven't had any non-certified, or we had one certified as well. And then for our students, in terms of our COVID symptoms, and then also our positive cases, again, South is, John was talking about South, and it's definitely challenging with the little ones, and so we found out we had another positive case today, and so we're actually pausing our AM EC tomorrow, just because, again, with close contacts and those types of things, it's very challenging with those little guys. But we had 2 positive cases at the junior high and 2 positive cases at the high school since our last board meeting. Our vaccination status continues to improve. We're averaging about 21% And again, I think this is low. I think, though, that we're relying on our parents to upload the information into Skyward. We also are starting the process of looking up vaccination status as well, so we can confirm, get a better accurate percentage on where we're at in terms of our vaccination. Again, the CDC transmission levels, this is how we determine if we're at low, moderate, substantial, or high. And it's a combination of the positivity rate and new cases per 100,000. And again, whichever, it just takes one of those metrics to bump you into a higher substantial level. But again, we're seeing a nice downward trend with our positivity and number of new cases. Currently, the health department does support test to stay, and again, we have an agreement with North Shore Labs to provide COVID testing. It's a voluntary basis, and again, they adjusted their schedule because of the holiday yesterday. They did the testing today, but parents can always opt in, and they can also opt out at any time.
Have you had any trouble getting results from them?
You know, there was only, like, right around the holidays, right after the holidays, they had a uptick in just not only our district, but other districts, other areas. And so there was a little bit of lag then. But since then, it's typically within 24 hours.
Great, thank you.
We're getting those results, yep. And then at our last board meeting, the board updated our mitigation plan. And so now we're looking at our masking requirement is going to be based upon the percent positivity that we have within our schools, and we're still calling for the exclusion, and then again, masks are required on our buses. And so again, what we're looking at is a phase definition, so universal masking, all students and staff are wearing masks. Situational is when you can't maintain 3 feet, and then recommended or optional masking is when our students and visitors have that option, as well as our staff. In terms of the metrics for that, for greater than 3% positivity in our schools, that's when it's universal. Situational is it's between 1% and 3%, and then recommended is less than 1%. And it just, and in terms of, and we did update this with staff, because I think that was a question last time when we include staff. And so you can kind of see the number of cases that a building would have to experience in order to be at universal masking, situational masking, and then recommended masking. And if you take a look at what we experienced in the since our last board meeting, at the end of the week, we had 1 positive case at South. We had the 2 at the junior high and the 2 at the high school. And so, you know, assuming that our numbers continue to trend this way, next Monday, then we would be strongly recommended masking at all of our buildings, because our positivity would be less than 1% of all of our schools. And so if this year's COVID experience models last year, when we got to this time of year, we started to see the numbers drop off, and they continue to trend in that way. As a matter of fact, in June, there were a lot of different conversations with school districts when you're looking at the experience. It was when we hit July, that's when we started to see another uptick that changed those conversations. So I think when we make that transition on Monday, there's a very good chance that we'll be able to, you know, stay at that level, but we'll continue to monitor the positive cases that we have. And then as reminders, you know, parents should keep their students home if they have symptoms. And then the close contact is defined as if students are masked, it's 3 feet. If they're not masked, it's less than 6 feet. And then again, for the quarantine, for the unvaccinated who test positive, and then for vaccinated persons who are asymptomatic, there's no need to quarantine. So that's the update on this year. Are there any questions on that?
Are we gonna roll into?
Well, yeah, if there's no questions
Next
on this,
item
then we
is
can
the
roll.
mitigation planning.
We can roll into that.
So if are there no questions, I just want to make sure before we,
I only just have a brief question. The student vaccination status, have you seen any numbers from any other districts around here?
No, I haven't. I can reach out and see, but I haven't seen the vaccination status for other districts.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we're just having trouble collecting the data or if it is low.
You know, I know other districts, they've been collecting it. I can find out if they've had a little bit more success than we have.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the districts are doing it the same way that we are in terms of asking families to, you know, share the vaccination card with the schools.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, just to echo what Kevin said, I think I've said it at a lot of meetings, it just doesn't seem accurate. So,
Right,
you
right.
know, as quickly as we can get a more accurate number, I think the better. And I don't know if that's just like a technology thing, like, you know, just logging into Skyward scanning. I don't know if that's complicated or not.
I don't think
I didn't
it's
have to do
like
it. I
highly-
don't know, but I just, you know, I think the sooner we can start looking that content up, and I don't know if for next year, like, there's a way to get it in more seamlessly.
Well, again, you can ask parents to submit it. Right now, it's not a required vaccine.
Right.
So you can ask people, you know, parents to share that information, you know.
But I mean, we've moved away from that 70% vaccinated anyway.
Right,
So,
right,
yeah, just, it would just be nice to have a more accurate number.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's great to get more information, but looking nationally, I don't think it's far off. We can be honest and say that that number is not high for that age group. So we're not going to see something, I don't think that's substantial. I think it's great. Let's continue to ask as much as we can because it changes and people are,
Right.
you know, getting vaccinated, you know, still, but I don't think it's going to climb that much more.
Right.
all right, if there's no more questions, we'll move into the 201 mitigation planning, next item on the agenda.
So again, the slide right now, this is the what the board approved at our special board meeting on the 17th. And as luck would have it, at 11:40, I think it was about 11:45 that evening, that night, the appellate court released their ruling, and the clarity we were all hoping for really wasn't achieved. And so the basically it said the appeal was moot because of some of the actions that was taken with JCAR and some other entities. So basically, it didn't weigh into a lot of things. And so it did say, you know, basically the takeaway is that local school districts can determine their mitigations. When it comes to masks, that is a pretty defendable position because, you know, there is that question of what constitutes a quarantine. And so if you take it to the extreme, you know, anything that prevents the spread of disease is a quarantine. We can get down the road of, well, asking students to wash their hands after using the restroom is a form of quarantine. And so, you know, the use of masks definitely helps with the spread of disease. And so using our metrics, again, not saying that we'll have to require a mask, but using our metrics is something that I think is defendable. The question comes in when you start talking about excluding close contacts. And so that if there's an area that the board can make any changes they choose to, but we can move from required exclusion to recommended exclusion. And then it would be up to parents to decide if their child was a close contact, if they keep their child at home or not. It wouldn't be mandated by the school district.
So just a question, how would they decide? Would they get information? So a parent could get the recommended, I guess, qualifier. That's what you're saying?
Right.
That school would say, well, under our provisions, your student's considered a close contact, but they make a decision what they want to do.
Right.
Okay.
So right now, it's either from the health office or the main office. Somebody contacts a family and, you know, shares that their child was a close contact to a positive case. And right now, it'd be that your child is required to stay home for 5 days, and as long as they're symptom-free, they can return. If it was recommended, then that's what would be shared. You know, that's recommended that the child stay home for 5 days, but ultimately it would be the parent's choice then.
Can you talk me through the process for the adaptive pause that just happened at South? So like, how did that go? You know, how did we go from, obviously there was a case, but how did you go from one case to an adaptive pause for tomorrow's AM group?
With the younger students, because it's difficult to maintain social distancing, that almost basically the entire classroom ends up being a close contact. Those students are not eligible to be vaccinated, and so so that is what ultimately, okay, we're going to pause this class.
So was that driven by the DuPage County Health Department, or was that a choice on the administration's part?
That's a choice on the administration's part.
And when does the DuPage County Health Department come in?
DuPage County Health Department would come in again if it's outbreak. Then the DuPage County Health Department comes in when there's an outbreak.
And the outbreak is 2 or more,
Right.
correct?
Kevin, I have a question for you, unless you had a follow-up to that statement. Okay. I think it's obvious, at least from my perspective, that we have to look at the close contact and determine whether or not we want to continue with the plan we have in place for close contact or revisit that tonight in terms of mitigations. The mask policy, though, I want to just be clear in terms of you used the words, I think, you think our current policy is defendable. And I just want to make sure when you say that, you're basing that on information you received from our legal team?
Right.
Okay. I just want to make sure where that
Right,
position of yours is coming from, so that it's clear to the board and clear to the community, why you think our position on masks is defendable at this point.
Right. This past week, when there were several conversations with our law firm about the appellate court decision and what it means and what school districts can and cannot do. And so that is coming from my conversations I had with our law firm.
Okay.
I know we need to talk a little bit about the quarantine thing. I just, since we have the opportunity to be talking about mitigations again, I just want to reiterate what I talked about at the last meeting, which is that I really don't feel good about this plan. I still have a great deal of hesitation about the situational masking, and I think we heard some of that in public comment this evening from the student perspective. This particular student being nervous that, the kids just would not put them back on, the whole putting the toothpaste back in the tube analogy again. So I just wanted to express that, but I still am just also really struggling with the metric that we're using for deciding the different tiers. I think at the last meeting you said several times that the DuPage County Health Department actually said that a better indicator is not to look at the building metric, but to look at the community metrics instead. And I understand we're in high transmission because of the number of new cases, but the positivity rate is actually low at less than 5%. And then we're trying to say that there's going to be universal masking at 3%, which is even lower than that. I don't know. I worry that we're going to get into that back and forth with masks too frequently. And I still the legal stuff just still is making me real nervous. I just think we're opening ourselves up to a messy situation there. I'm not sure it's as defendable as we think it is. And I guess the amount of kind of chaos and messiness that we're creating for ourselves in terms of lawsuits, compliance and enforcement, which is going to get harder, even if it's been okay for the past week or so, it is going to get harder as more and more schools and the state and the nation drop their mask mandates, we can't expect that. And then we're just gonna, okay, well, we'll come back and we'll have all these special board meetings and reassess. When I just think let's be proactive. Let's get ahead of that. I don't think we need to put ourselves in that situation. I think we're fueling divisiveness the longer we hold on to this, and that's not good for us either. And so if we're dealing right now with tremendous numbers of deaths, a very deadly, I know it's contagious, a very deadly variant, no vaccine, difficulty getting PPE, nobody else around us was dropping mask mandates, then I could understand digging our heels in and really holding on to this. I'm struggling to understand it though, and I feel alone in that, but I just wanted to share my opinion on it. I'm not sure.
So, and please don't clap when I say this, please. I am inclined to agree. However, my concern lies with South at this point. We have now seen one more week of numbers, with the numbers dropping by more than half. And following that, I agree that this is what happened last year, and we can feel very confident in that. And then we'll see a spike after spring break. I'm concerned with South and how we handle that situation and how the health department can help us with that situation, because those kids are all under 5, or the vast majority of them are under 5. And many of them have IEPs for a variety of different reasons, but health concerns being some of them, and being unable to be vaccinated. We were hoping that we'd have some vaccine pieces at this point. But so I'm inclined to agree. School district, boards of education do their best work when they're future thinking. And this pandemic, has driven divisiveness, but it's driven divisiveness because we're being forced to be in the moment of the business of the district. And that's not what school boards do well, because we meet once a month, maybe once every other week, maybe. We do really well when we are doing forward-thinking things, like working on the superintendent search, doing things that affect the future of the district, that gives us the time to really go through that. So it's been really hard to be a board during this time because of that immediate need. So I'm inclined to agree with Jess, but I'm concerned, what do we do for South? Because I do think we've got all these other mitigation abilities in place for all of the older schools, but how do we solve South?
And we have IEPs in all the other buildings as well. Where do we open ourselves up for litigations for kids that get sick if we were to just completely drop the masks? Do we have possibility of litigations from kids with health concerns at all the other buildings?
Well, there's risks on all sides, so.
My concern more at the other buildings with I understand the IEP piece of it at the other buildings, and I think there are risks in all the other ways, but the kids at South do not have the ability to get vaccinated. Right. And their parents don't have the ability to choose vaccines for them. And there are 18 kids in the morning, 18 kids in the afternoon. That can get out of control real quickly because it's real small. So how does the DuPage County Health Department help us there? Or what do we do there when we inevitably see this spike in the spring or after spring break, so that those kids aren't on an adaptive pause for a week or 2 weeks? Or, I think that as we come towards the end of the school year, if we've got to take emergency days because we need to take some emergency days after the end of spring break, we've already taken 2, then we might need to do that. And that might just need to be part of the thought process. But what is it for South? How do we solve for South? Or how does the health department help us with that?
Yeah, I can reach out to the health department and see, what their recommendations are. I think, South, just like the other students in our district, as those numbers drop off, we'll see fewer and fewer positive cases at South as well. If there's an uptick, it won't just be an uptick at South. We'll be seeing an uptick in the community. You'll be seeing an uptick in the district and other districts. And so, and then, mitigations may have to be adjusted, we don't know. But I think I can reach out to the health department and see for an early childhood program what they would recommend. I know the approach we're taking is similar to other early childhood programs. It's just it's a tough group, because of the age of the students.
Can we have, a masking required just for that school because that they do not have the ability to get the vaccine? Is that, or do we have to do the same thing for all the schools?
No, we can do that. You can do that for South if you would like.
And that would be if,
'Cause there-
if there's a certain number of
Right.
cases.
Back in the summer, we were talking about having mitigations based upon the fact that the junior high and high school are eligible for the vaccine, but the elementary school wasn't.
Yeah.
So we're looking at different mitigations, earlier in the summer. So yes, you could have, something different for South versus what you have for the K through 12.
I think I'd be more inclined to agree with Jess if the vaccination numbers of the students were higher, but 22% it doesn't seem feasible right now.
So
What have the neighboring schools seen?
They don't know.
They've dropped. Have they seen spikes?
Some have, some are on a similar timeline to us. They're starting next week. One superintendent that I talked to, they've been optional for 2 weeks, and he said that they've continued to see the decline, just like the community has. So they haven't seen a spike as a result.
I can say the same of the school I work at. We've been optional for a little while, and we have not seen a spike.
I don't, not saying you don't see a spike now, it's because we're in this in the valley of this pandemic. What have we seen previous years? Not saying that, I don't think using that to say we haven't seen a spike is yet. And so my concern, as people asked before this conversation started to take flight of let's take the mask off now because it's the winter, people are tired, and that's understandable. But what's been said by a lot of health officials, yes, we're going to see a dip and we're going to see a decrease, and that is a time to say, okay, we can relax. That was already coming. So a lot of things I don't understand why this is it became divisive when we knew this was coming. And became arguments among people and neighbors. We knew we were going to get here, but what I don't see as we try to figure out things for everyone, for all of our students, I see both. I see arguments from both. We've definitely got letters from both sides, but we're talking about, we are talking about how do we decrease the mitigations, but we don't talk a lot about, and I mean we as a whole, not just this board, we don't talk a lot, address those people that are concerned and want safety. And we're trying to do that as a board, how do we still keep people safe and those that are concerned and want that choice to continue to wear a mask and be safe, how do we address that part of safety? I honestly just see us talking about how do we strip all mitigations. I don't, as we're talking about taking those layers away, then what layers do we give people who are asking for safety? What do we have there? If we're trying to come down percentages, like the CDC said use both, then we argue, should we just use one? But are we just doing this just to make ourselves feel better that we're taking away layers? I don't see the other part of it, the other half of that equation of how we balance out safety. Yes, we can talk about percentages. The health departments won't give us an exact number, but they are, using the 5% or not going to the, moderate levels and substantial levels. They'll give us this. No, they're not going to give us exact because, again, people will argue what basis do they have to put on rules or laws, but they do give some guidance. So are we just doing it just to not have layers of mitigation and safety? We are picking that number. I do appreciate the work you guys have done and given that percentage of 3%. And even looking back to say how, if we use that, if we backtracked, what, how many times would we have been mask required? Like, I think that 3% level is kind of your litmus test to say, hey, if things are getting dangerous, there are 12 cases in our school, we better stop and take a look. Like, if we raise that, again, how are we assuring safety?
But then we bring it to the DuPage County Health Department, who's already been, who should at this point already be in it. We've got 12 cases at our school. We bring it to the DuPage County Health Department,
Right.
and ask them for direction. I mean,
And that's fine.
I
So we
see
have
the
12.
both sides of it, but what we have seen is that historically, over the last 30 months, Westmont as a community, its percentage, I could count on one hand how many times our percentage of transmission was higher than our neighboring communities. Westmont has consistently, as a community, held the transition rate very low and almost always lower than our surrounding communities, which I think is awesome. And I think that tells us a lot about our community. So we see the numbers dropping, and we are in a valley. We are absolutely going to see a spike in spring, after spring break. I think certainly, but seeing the numbers drop by another half, and even then down from 16 to 2 in less than a month. I think our community percentage is below 3%, and all 5 of our schools would be on masks strongly recommended, otherwise known as masks optional. Right? Let's be honest. Mask strongly recommended is
Mask optional.
mask optional. Make the best choice for your own family. That is the same thing.
Right.
And all 5 of our schools would be in that, which tells me something, right? It tells me something that really we are already at masks recommended or strongly recommended, and that those other pieces, if they need to come into play, we need to ask the health department for help on that. And I see it being a challenge and an issue specifically at South, where they don't have, where families do not have as many choices to protect those kids.
Right.
And the kids and the teachers that are at South. And our concern as a school board is the health and safety of our staff and our families, and keeping the kids in school. So South has already had 2 adaptive pauses in the last couple of weeks, so that's my concern there, is keeping those kids in school. And we were able to handle the peaks of 16% after the holidays with staff that was out. We were able to handle. I'm not saying it's great, I'm not saying it was wonderful, I'm not saying it was the best situation, but we were able to handle that as staffing, and I don't see those numbers going back up to 16%, even post spring break. So I don't want to make this job harder for all of our administrators, all of our families, and all of our staff. It's not, like I said last week, there's literally not a single winner. There is not a single person in this entire district who is going to get every single thing that they want. But maybe we need to pull back on pieces, and not to just answer it, but to give the options.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. That's where we are, and that's our argument. Like, we've established something to look at, and we have that level. It's established. Like, let's look at that, and we discussed it last week. That's saying, hey, they have a plan. Let's look at this plan. And if it makes you feel better, you can look backwards and say, hey, our community, we would be at mask optional for multiple weeks. So we said we're afraid of flipping back. Look at where we would have been. Would we have been flipping? No, we would still be a mask optional. So even trying to take that back further, that's my argument. What are we arguing? Are we just trying to get away with it? If that's the argument, then make that the proposal, not have any mitigations, but use what has been proposed and say we have some layer of safety, and then, yes, continue to review that. I don't think we have to continue to have special meetings to review that. We have the time to take a look and even talk to our staff and say, and ask them if they are, the control of it is, too much. It doesn't look like, if you, again, look backwards, there's not much control if we're in mask optional for week upon week upon week. So maybe we don't have to be afraid of that. But we have to start somewhere, or be honest, if people are asking to take everything away, then make that the question. I don't think we have to.
So can I just say, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, like, there's a few board members who haven't had an opportunity to weigh in at all, and so I just want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to weigh in, and then we can kind of debate everybody's points. I know I have something I want to say, but I don't know Carlos or Ange, I think, and Kevin, I'm not sure if you've weighed in, but if.
I'm taking it all in right now, so.
Yeah, I'm listening because there's a lot of interesting
Yeah.
comments being made and points of view being discussed. I understand Jess's position to be, Jess, and I'm asking you for clarification. I understand your position to be, A, concerned about the legality of what.
Yeah, that's a piece of.
That, A, one.
Yeah.
And the other, the enforceability, maybe is the right word, or the, how it's implemented and what the consequences of implementing are and how that plays out.
That and the metrics.
And the metrics
Yeah,
themselves.
Yeah, because, 1 week it could be, whether, we could have in DuPage County make it to that low with case count and percentage, and there's a fluke random, like, group of friends and 10 of them have COVID, and then your mask optional, so those situations can vary, those combinations can happen, and it just is illogical if there's, just this friend group here, but overall, as a community, it's not, we're in low transmission and the entire school has to be masked. I don't understand that. So metrics was the other piece. Sorry, keep going.
So it's, when you say the metrics, you mean specifically the fact that it goes by school instead of by the community?
Yeah, I think, yeah. And I'm not, yes, I'm not sure I know what I don't know what the best metric is.
Right.
We don't.
I get it, but
Nobody
that's
does.
what,
Yeah.
I'm just making sure I understand the concern.
Yeah.
From the standpoint of legality, I think we all know that we're damned if we do, and we're damned if we don't.
Absolutely.
I think we all can acknowledge that as a board. The legality, not to minimize your concern, but I think we all know that there are
There are threats either way. Or risks.
Well, there's only threats one way that I've heard so far, but there are liabilities both ways.
Yes.
So, but there's a distinction between a liability and someone actually telling you that they're going to sue you,
Right.
which is, there's a difference. But that difference notwithstanding, there are liabilities in both directions, and I think we understand that. So your concern about, I share your concern about liability. I really do. I didn't join the board to be sued. But I don't know that we can avoid liability at this point, no matter what we do. That's just my opinion. In terms of the enforceability and how things are implemented in the back and forth, I mean, de facto, Leah already said it, and I think we all know, we're moving to mask optional. That's what we're doing. That's what we're doing based on the numbers. That's what we're doing based on the plan that the administration has put forward. We, on Monday, will be mask optional based on this plan. So we could say the district is moving to mask optional, but we all know that we'll have to revisit if numbers change. We know that. I think all of us can agree that at some point we may have different opinions as to where those thresholds lie or what the thresholds even are. But we all know that there's some point at which we would want masks to come back on if things get bad enough. And we can debate what bad enough means. So it's kind of semantics, in my mind anyway, whether we choose to say, as of Monday, School District 201 is optional, or we say, as of Monday, School District 201, CUSD 201, is mask optional unless these criteria are met. And then we will change to a different position. So I understand how complicated that might be, and I said last week what I said about our ability as a school district to navigate complex situations. I think we've proven that we can do so, but I think we also have an obligation to those who are concerned about mask optional to let them know under what circumstances would we move to masks required or mask situational. and maybe, again, I don't disagree with you, by the way, that maybe those metrics aren't the right ones. We said this last week, and I feel the same way you do about those metrics. I'm not sure that they're the right metrics. But there are some situations, not to be grotesque or alarmist, but if there were people running around Westmont sick by the dozens or by the scores, we would probably, many of us would want masks back on. Some would not. Some don't want masks back on under any circumstances whatsoever. But some would want masks in school where children are required to be by law. They don't have a choice to be there. So I think when it comes to where the threshold should be, we can debate where it should be, but that there should be one. I don't agree that there should not be one. Yeah, and then in terms, yeah, I think I've discussed the implementation and the threshold. So that's where I stand on this. I would be fine personally, honestly, and I would vote tonight. I'll tell you right up front. Yes, if we said no, let's do away with the metrics and let's just go mask optional. That's fine. And then we'll be in this room 2 weeks from now discussing at what point do we go back to masks if we need to at some point. What would those metrics look like? Either way, the debate continues.
Yeah. So, thank you, Carlos. I appreciate that. I'll just go ahead. From the beginning, what we've said in our debates at this board table and to the community is that our priority is keeping the kids in school in person. And I agree with Carlos that one of the ways we can do that, if we want to go mask recommended tonight and, discuss the mitigations for quarantine, one of the ways we can ensure our community that we are going to keep kids in school in person is to set a threshold for when we will review mitigations again should cases skyrocket. And I think, to me, that sounds like a very reasonable approach. I do want to address just the comment of it feels like we're just digging in our heels. With all due respect, I find that really divisive language even for this board table. I think this board has tried really hard to make decisions that are reasonable and practical and based in very solid rationale. Unemotional decisions that are not reacting to the public comments we've got on both sides that have been kind and supportive and also, in a different direction as well. I think I don't see us carving our own path as digging in our heels.
I apologize.
Yeah, I really needed to address that out of respect for the board.
So that was not my intent, but I understand the impact must have been different.
I think that it's important that we as a board feel comfortable not just following the lead of other districts. If other districts said they were going to remove, their early childhood programs, we wouldn't just do that because 83% of them do it. And I know that's an extreme example, but we need to be responsible for our district, and I think that's what we've been doing. That said, I do think I had a lot of conversations since our meeting on Thursday with a lot of folks, and I think that the current recommendation is very confusing for the public. And I think that doesn't help the situation any if it's, yes, we can do hard things. To Carlos's point, we can do hard things. But I think that right now, generally speaking, the public thinks we are going mask optional as of February 28th anyway. And so honestly, I think you have more support for your position, Jess, than you think. My only other comment alongside of that would be exactly what Carlos said, is I think we need a threshold where we, are responsibly looking at if the numbers continue to increase, when do we review and make a recommendation on the high side to return to some mitigations.
And I feel like we've been really good about keeping an eye on those things and bringing it back to the table. And I also think that if that happens, if cases increase or a new variant becomes more dangerous, we'll probably get some guidance too. We'll see what's happening around us. We'll hear from the CDC and IDPH, and so I don't think it's just I just think that the threshold piece, we shouldn't have to take on that responsibility just now and trying to figure that out. But I'm not saying, we decide to go mask optional and we're done here. We never come back to it. We know that's not how COVID works. We will come back to it. I agree with what Carlos said about liability. There's liability either way. I personally feel there's a little more in one scenario than the other. And I don't think either that we're trying to just say, let's get rid of all mitigations. I think that we're still trying to be very cognizant about social distancing when we can, and keeping things clean and encouraging vaccination. And as far as people who are hungering for safety, I mean, the vaccine, is one of the best things. The KN95 masks are proven to be very beneficial as well. There are things out there, not to mention the fact that where we're at with the particular variant, it is a little bit less risky. I mean, these are all just facts. And again, I wouldn't be pushing it if I didn't, feel like it were safe for the people who are nervous. I see those people every day in my building as well. And we, it's a lot of reassuring and talking with them and helping them through it. And so far it's okay, but yeah, we'll have to revisit it for sure. I appreciate what you said, Laura, though, about it feeling confusing, because it has felt a little confusing to me from the beginning. Complicated.
I could see the confusion in the situational masking. I think that's what throws everyone off. So say we wanted a threshold. Say we follow what the CDC threshold is. Let's say tomorrow is the 28th. If we followed this, it would be universal masking, correct? Because there are over 100 cases in the whole county.
Mm-hmm. Well,
or in our town,
right.
Actually.
I mean, right, I mean.
100 per 1,000.
100 per 100,000, correct. Yeah, sorry.
Right. I mean,
But that would mean universal masking through all the buildings. All good points are being made. Ideally, we are mask optional starting the 28th. But yes, we need a threshold that if something were to go awry, and I really do think we need a threshold to see where this goes backwards. I mean, the number one goal is making sure the kids are in school.
Yep. And what a lot of my speech that I guess I'm not feeling I'm being understood is not just with masks, because what this is looking at also, what Kevin has asked us. So, and when I make that statement of, are we taking all mitigations away? Kids are in, 3 feet apart as best we can. What does that mean? It means a lot of time they won't be. We're saying for close contacts, and legally, and this may be what we have to do, but I'm saying look at it as a whole. We can't ask, or we can't require that someone that, with this virus, that's very transmissible, whatever variant you want to choose. And that's what we may have to do, and some health officials would say that, oh, that's okay, close contacts, that child is probably okay, you can test to stay or what have you. But if we also take that away, that pretty much we're saying it's recommended, but we're not, that's another mitigation that goes away. And so, we have that. So yes, we've always had, hand washing, yes, we, push that, but these are the main things that we're trying to weigh together. So I'm not just speaking of mask and going mask optionals, all these other things that we have that essentially, won't be there. The quarantine and how do you define that? So that's what I'm saying. What do we have and how do we look? And our main thing that we're talking about now is when do we ring the alarm to say we're concerned. Do we do that at 12 cases at one school? Do we do that at 20 cases at one school?
Masks feel like the cliff.
Right, but I'm
right?
saying.
They feel like the cliff edge, right?
Feel like the what, I'm sorry.
They feel like we're on the edge of the cliff,
Okay.
right? If we say masks optional, like, it feels like that piece of like jump off, right? Now we're jumping off and everything else is gonna be more challenging from here on out. With that said, I found myself over the last couple of days thinking about what are these other mitigations that we have in place, right? And many of you know I love my lists and I like bullet points a whole lot. And I like checking things off, right? I don't have a clear kind of list in my head of what are the mitigations that are in place and what do we lay, we talk about the peel of the onion, we talk about removing mitigations, but I have a hard time, and I think this might be where some of the confusion comes into play too, from us and from the community as well, right? Are we talking about mitigations, or are we talking about masking? If we're not always talking about the other mitigations that are in place, the list of things that are in place, then inevitably it's going to be construed that we're talking about masking. And masking is the main mitigation. Don't get me wrong, right? But we do have the 3 foot in place. We do have, I know, at the different schools, especially at the younger schools, the assigned seating, and helping those pieces of close contacts and being able to understand so that it's not just it's not like a total free for all. But I feel like I would like a list of just here's our 20 mitigations that are in place, and here are the ones that are
I'm sure Kevin can rattle them off right
Yeah,
now
I
in
know,
large
I know.
part.
Yeah, if the board remembers, at the 17th board meeting, I did have the list
Right.
of
Okay.
mitigations.
Right.
And so it is the masking, it is the 3 feet, social distancing, it's the testing program, you know, the optional testing, it's the test to stay, it's the frequent hand washing, it's the cleaning of desktops and lunch tables. You know, desktops are daily, lunch tables are after every lunch. It's the contact tracing, like the exclusion of students who are close contacts, who are unvaccinated close contacts. It's
and that's the one that we specifically have to talk about today.
right.
That's
It's
my point.
students who are symptomatic, asking those students to not come to school and either wait until their symptoms are alleviated or they have a negative test. So it's all those different layers that we have.
So can we specifically, Kevin, turn the conversation at this point to the close contacts and the symptoms, students with symptoms? If I heard you correctly early on, that's where our biggest legal risk is right now. If we continue to ask unvaccinated close contacts to quarantine, that puts us at the biggest legal risk right now. Is that correct? What about students who have COVID symptoms and, you know, having them leave the building, basically, is the way it's been handled right now, and not be able to come back without a...
I would need to ask that exact question.
Okay.
There is a little bit of difference between being symptomatic and asymptomatic. So the close contacts typically don't have symptoms, and we ask them to stay home for 5 days. Or they can test to stay, you know, which they're tested 1, 3, 5, and 7. Days 1, 3, 5, and 7. Symptoms, that would have to be, that's something I'd want to ask that specific question and see, you know, what our risk is with that.
Yeah.
I mean, as it is right now, if a student is feverish, regardless of if it's a pandemic or not, those students are asked to go home. If students are vomiting, they're asked to go home. So there are certain symptoms with the pandemic that has become a little bit broader, like what type of symptoms we would ask a parent to pick up their child.
And Kevin, do you know with the close contact test to stay, is that part of this requirement that that's not well, it's never required, but
It's never
Can a
required.
parent say, I don't want to quarantine and I don't want to test to stay?
Yes, that would, like right now, parents have the choice of having their child stay home or allowing them to enter the test to stay. They have that choice.
Okay, we need to have the crowd not commenting and talking, because I've heard several comments in the last couple of minutes. Can we please just have our meeting? And please, if you want to be here, that's great, but we can't have comments.
No, there's no questions either. There are no questions either. Go ahead, Kevin.
If we went to where it's recommended students are excluded, then you wouldn't, it would be also recommended that they test to stay. So a student would be able to remain in school, but not necessarily be going through a test to stay protocol.
And is that the recommendation that is recommended at this point? Is that coming from you and the legal team that?
Right,
that no
that's
longer
what
it be required?
Right, I would recommend that.
Okay.
Have you had any discussions with our insurers, how this would affect us?
They won't weigh in on it. There is no like liability insurance for COVID-19 for the pandemic. And so basically what it comes down to is, you know, whether or not a district was negligent or those types of things. And unfortunately, they're not going to assess your risk, your liability until there's an actual case where you're calling upon them.
Okay.
I think we talked about that way back in the beginning when, with teacher risk, right? And concluded, and I can't remember if there was legal guidance on that, that it'd be really hard to prove that it was, didn't that happen? Somebody, I mean, I think.
Not in our
might
district,
have-
it hasn't.
Oh,
I'm not
okay,
sure.
and,
I'm not sure.
wound up that the person got it like on vacation or something, and it just, like, because you have to track every single interaction that they've had, so
right,
I think, I don't know. Again, not a legal expert, but I
Right.
feel like we would be okay because, especially with the whole state going mask optional, how do you know you got it in school versus all of the other places? So I hear what you're saying, like in terms of liability, if somebody contracts COVID, is that what you're saying, Kevin? Yeah. I just think that's less of a liability maybe than we think.
So as a board, is it question like, I guess, question of where do we stand and where we're going from here?
Right,
I guess
right. So
Yes, so we have an action item on the agenda
right, so
tonight.
actually, if the board wants to make adjustments, you know, to our updated mitigations, the board has that opportunity. You would need to reach consensus on what those changes you want to be. And then later on in the board meeting, when the action item comes up, then that would be the update that you're voting to approve.
So do we want to have a conversation about coming to a consensus about, help me out, Kevin, you just said the board would have to have a conversation, come to a consensus about updating metrics?
Well,
Updating the mitigation plan, yeah. Go
Based
ahead,
upon what
Kevin.
I'm hearing, I think there are two things on the table. One is the you know, switching from required exclusion for close contacts to recommended. The other piece that was generated through your conversation is whether or not at this time we get away from having metrics like 1%, 3%, you know, 2 to 3%, and just say that as of February 28th, masks are, I prefer strongly recommended. At this point, are strongly recommended. But, you know, either revisit metrics at a later date, or if we start to see an uptick in positive cases, start having a discussion of what that threshold, what that acceptable threshold is.
Sorry, Kevin, you strongly recommend no metrics, or I'm confused?
No, masks are strongly recommended,
Okay.
is what he was saying.
I
Kevin.
feel comfortable leaving our percentages in place till this next meeting and voting on the fact that we change required to recommended. We can revisit the numbers again at the next meeting, because with the downtick, we're not gonna see universal masking. Like, we're seeing the numbers go down, we're going to be in a good place for strongly recommended / means optional masking starting next Monday. That's where I'm at.
We might though, I mean, because we're doing it just based on school, based on cases. How, and when cases are reported, how are they reported?
They're reported either through the parent, says that my child is tested positive. It could come through the health department, or it's through our testing program.
And when the parent says the child's positive, what else? What other information is gathered, or just that? Like phone call?
No, there's typically asked questions about if the parent has an idea of possibly how they caught the virus, and then the school goes through a process of determining whether students may have been in close contact. But that would be something, based upon the board's decision, that step we wouldn't take. Well, no, I take that back. We'd inform close contacts, but they wouldn't be required to be excluded.
So I said this somewhere else at a PTO meeting. Don't let perfect be the enemy of done. And I'm concerned we're letting perfect be the enemy of done. And I'm not using done because we're not done with the pandemic, but
I thought you said dumb. You said done. I was like, wow, girl.
Finished.
Okay, so done.
Finished.
D-O-N-E.
Laura, you think I'm divisive?
Maybe I'll work that into a board meeting somewhere else. But no, I'm worried that we're getting in that area of don't let perfect be the enemy of done. I think that we've called out a couple of things. From a litigation standpoint, both sides equal, right? From a toothpaste back into the toothpaste tube, we're there, okay? That's gonna happen, right? Toothpaste is out of the toothpaste tube as of Monday. It is already, right? So if we talk about how we support everybody in the community, because nobody is getting everything that they want, because that's not possible. How do we support and give some idea for the folks who are very concerned, right? For the folks who do have severe challenges, right? Health challenges, whatever it may be, right? Anxiety, all of those pieces, right? How do we support those people as well? Because they are as equal parts of our community as folks on the other side, right? And everybody in between. So I'm hearing a lot of, we're still not sure on the percentage points, right? The CDC calls out utilizing two. If we only look at the schools, what else are we looking at? I do think that there's a spot there to look at the community spread, which is what? CDC?
Yeah.
Or DuPage Health Department? Or IDPH?
DuPage County Health Department.
Okay. Looking at that community spread versus the entire school, I think there's a piece of seeing those together and putting a threshold on that, on the top side of, and remove situational, remove the 1%, remove the 14 different percentage points, and say at 5% community spread and 5% per building, we revisit. From a simplicity standpoint, because we do need to, there's folks that are concerned on both sides for very different reasons, but ultimately they all come from the exact same place. Care for our families and care for the people that we love, right? That's where all of it comes from. In two very different ways.
I like the way you said that, because frankly, like, revisit doesn't mean we put everything back in place. Revisit means we come to the board table with a conversation about mitigations if the numbers reach a certain threshold. I mean, I still feel very awkward about us as a board sort of randomly pulling numbers out of the air and saying 5% is reasonable, and like that to me feels really uncomfortable. And I feel like we just, I hear you, and that's in my gut, that's where my reasonable brain was going, was like 5%. That sounds about right.
Well, and I'm not pulling that out of the air. I'm pulling it off of the CDC transmission slide, right? Moderate transmission is 5 to 8%. That's where I'm pulling it out of. So I'm not pulling it out of the air. That's where we added that 3% for the situational piece of it, right? I'm not pulling it out of, that's where I'm pulling it from, is from that CDC slide.
And so are you saying that that's the point at which we would talk about it again? Not necessarily it's an automatic universal masking. Like, I think that's what I could get behind tonight, is saying that as of the 28th, masks are strongly recommended.
I mean, I'm going to be
Period.
honest. If we're at 5% in a school and we're at 5% in a community, I think we need to have masks back on.
We're too late, yeah.
We are too late. I agree.
Too late to talk about it.
And as much as I enjoy love having emergency meetings, if that's what supports us the best, is saying at 5% and 5%, we get back to the table and we talk about it, then maybe that's what we need to do.
And I think to your point about like making people who feel, and I think everybody initially when you shed the mask, if and when you choose to do that, it does cause a great deal of anxiety. We've been living in these for 2 years. It's very alarming. And I think what I hope is that people understand that this board will find comfort in knowing that we aren't just washing our hands of it and saying this is our decision and we move on. We will of course revisit it as we've revisited everything with an eye towards safety and comfort and in-person learning and all of that. So, it's not just a one and done and we're never going to have masks again. That we will continue the conversation always, I hope, provides some comfort, and that we'll continue to listen for what's happening in our communities and in our nation and with COVID, and pay attention to that and continue the discussion as we have for the past 2 years.
So I'm confused. Are we saying we're going to have a percentage to say masks are universally required, or are we going to have a conversation about it? I don't think we've
I don't think we've come to consensus on that.
Okay, because I don't see, like, I feel like we're saying we're not going to have the kids in school if we reach 3%. We're talking about a mask and safety. So it's like we're saying this is a really hard thing to say. Even if it's 5%, we can't say that we're move towards universal masking. We acknowledge that we're probably too late at that point if it's 15 kids. I don't understand the need to have a meeting about saying, hey,
and we don't
dangerous.
know here's my ideal world, right? Well, before 5%, the DuPage County Health Department says, do this, do this, do this, right? And does their job, right? Literally what they need to do.
I'm just talking about what
hope.
we're saying. Like, are we saying universal masking at 5%, or are we saying we're going to have an emergency meeting at 5%? I don't understand the need of a meeting to say if it's at 5%, we're getting to dangerous land. We need to have universal masking, and it's instructions that's direct, because as staff and students are concerned, parents don't know what to do. Like, they're just going to wait for a scheduled meeting. We're at 5%. Are we going to say at this percentage, whatever the board comes to, it's universal masking? I think we have to, delay a decision.
I still don't feel comfortable making that call about you. I feel comfortable just saying that masks are strongly recommended, and there's enough other mitigations and options out there to protect people. And if cases go up, again, like what you just said, Leah, that the CDC or IDPH will give us some guidance then.
But didn't we acknowledge that they don't give direct guidance?
Right.
They also haven't been forced to.
Right.
That's why
we have to make a decision.
That's why we have the current, where we're going now by the community, greater than 100 per 100,000, and then the percentages.
That we're looking to say and acknowledge that numbers are going lower. We don't, this is stringent. If we wait for the transmission, the total new cases per 100,000, if we wait for that, we're waiting for both. And so we're using a percentage, like what we're going to use the low transmission percentage by itself. I'm just saying, like, we are and I get there's a proposal just to go mask optional and look at it at a later date, so we're pushing off the decision. I'm asking the board, what are we deciding on? Is it the mask optional, the later decision to another meeting, or use what was proposed and examine how, what that is and review our protocols to see if we need to change it? What are we trying to do?
I think those are our two options.
I think that's what we're debating right now, and
yeah.
I mean, if we just want to, so if those are the two options, basically one being remove the thresholds that were set in place in the last meeting and just go to masks recommended, knowing at this table that should cases skyrocket, we will have to get back together and make a decision. That's one pathway. The other pathway is take what Kevin recommended last time and just say, maybe we want to tweak that to remove situational masking and just have recommended and universal, with a threshold for universal that is either the same as what Kevin recommended initially, 3%, or something different. Like, I feel like those are really I know that was 3 things, but those are really the 3 things we're debating. So, I mean, we could go around the room right now and say, which way is everybody leaning, to see if we have a consensus.
Can I just?
Because if I heard you right, we need to have a consensus to amend.
Right, I would recommend that you, that helps you know what you're voting on. So if you reach a consensus on what the consensus of the board is, then that's what the board members know. This is what you're voting to approve.
Right. So that's one component, and then the other component is the not quarantine, but the recommended, yes, exclusion for close contacts.
Just real quick, you're saying that we should come to a consensus on what we're going to vote on?
Yes.
Not what our vote itself is going to be.
No, just what we're going to vote on, what we're going to vote on.
Everyone else on the board, that this isn't about, it's about what are we going to vote on? Then you're going to vote.
Correct.
There's no point in voting twice.
Correct, but we have to say specifically what's in the amended mitigation plans
that's what I'm saying.
before we can vote.
Right, okay.
Right. So, what would the board members like, what would my fellow board members like to see in the updated mitigation plans? Again, option 1, recommended masking across the board. We revisit if cases skyrocket. Option 2, the proposal from last time excluding situational masking, okay? And option 3, the proposal from last time excluding situational masking and a greater percentage for when we go back to universal masking. Is everybody clear on those options?
And that's
Or no?
just on the masking?
That's just on the masking.
Recommended is a different situation.
Right.
We're just talking about the masking part
Yep.
right now.
So can we just all go around the room and say where we're at? Let's start,
That's a separate, the quarantine, that's a
start
separate.
with Jess.
I would just like to vote on masks being strongly recommended, and then we'll revisit, as we have been, and follow other mitigations.
Yeah, like I said before, I'm fine with 1, or I think 3 was the third one you said was keeping it at 3% for triggering universal. Is that what you said, or is that number 2?
That's number 2.
That's number 2.
I'm fine with 1 or 2. I
1 or
don't-
2, okay.
I'm not fussed about either.
I'm good with option 2.
2,
Yes.
okay,
2 or 3, whatever percentage
okay.
the board wants to use.
My preference would be option 1, masks recommended, and we revisit when cases skyrocket. Yeah, so I'm just gonna leave it at that for now.
Mine would be option 2.
1.
2.
So we have a majority of the board in favor of option 2, which is removing situational masking.
I don't think so. I think.
No, we're equal, because
It's
Carlos
equal.
I think we're equal.
Wait,
No.
we can't be tied. There's,
No, because Carlos said 1 or 2.
I'm
oh,
telling
you
you
said
that
1 or 2, you're fine either way.
Yes.
Okay, well,
So
you're forced to make a
equal, yeah.
decision now,
whichever
Carlos.
one you put to vote first is the one I would go with. I don't think there's any monumental difference between them.
I think we're gonna have more if cases skyrocket, we're gonna have more that we're gonna need to talk about. And so the point of having an additional percentage point, or putting a percentage point on it, is arbitrary, which is what we're talking about, right? It's arbitrary because if cases skyrocket, 5% or higher, right? We are gonna have a lot more to talk about.
And we're not gonna be alone in that either. I mean, it's gonna be every school, every health department looking at that.
So I would say one with a 5% of, we need to talk about it again, which, again, I'm just putting that, I put 5% in there because I think that the folks on the right side, and not like the right side, but like literally the right-handed side of the equation, not right or wrong, need that. They need to know when we are going to, when is a trigger for this board to come back together and talk again.
Well, I think we'll talk about it at every meeting anyway with
yes,
our
but
update.
revisit this specifically. I feel like the folks that are on literally the right-handed side, not right or wrong, need that number to know we're ticking up, we're ticking up, we're ticking up, we're ticking up. At 5%, the board is absolutely going to revisit this piece. I think that is important for the folks there.
Do we need
That
to make
option
that
two-
part of the
so
vote?
wait,
That's not part-
I heard you say you were in favor of option 1, but you were just making a case for option 2, in my
Is
opinion.
that option? I thought option 2 was universal at a percentage.
Yeah, Leah's just saying.
That's not, I'm saying it,
Saying
I'm saying
revisit.
it 5%,
Revisit it.
we talk about it, we revisit.
Okay.
And I think that can just be an understanding among the.
Yeah, I think that doesn't have to be a part of the mitigation plan. That can just
Okay.
be, we know we're going to revisit
It really
if it
isn't.
gets high enough.
All right, so Carlos, tiebreaker.
I'm not breaking any ties.
Say
Put it to
welcome
vote.
to the club.
All right, so let's table that for a second, and then we'll go to the,
Recommended or-
It's not
Thank
voting
you.
time yet. We go to the 2022-23 school year.
no, we have to decide on the, we have to make sure we're all in consensus about,
Recommended.
recommended, yes. Return to school or quarantine after close contact.
Recommended or required exclusion.
Recommended.
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 Same, recommended.
Recommended.
Okay, so, when we go to vote on the updated mitigation plan, we will be voting on making masks strongly recommended, knowing that we will revisit an upper threshold once we are in that situation. When we also, with that updated mitigation plan, we will be voting to make quarantine after close contact recommended instead of required. I don't know how else to do this at this point. So do I have to say that all when I go to make the
If everybody has an understanding, you can just say,
Changes as presented.
motion to update the mitigation plans as agreed upon by the board.
Okay, thank you.
And
All right,
updating them to that, it's not two separate votes. It's just that one vote.
It's just
to
one
change.
vote.
It's all part of the.
they're both in the
It's
updated
just
mitigation
all
plan.
together in
Yeah.
one, okay.
All right, next item is the 2022-23 school year.
And as we're transitioning to that, just a couple things. One is, I said this at our last meeting. Again, once the board approves our mitigation plan, the administrative team will implement, exactly the way that the board intends. So there's no concerns there. The other thing I want to remind the board, because we have a PR committee meeting on Thursday, and this came up in our PR committee on Thursday. Just a reminder, we're Community Unit School District 201. We're not Westmont 201. And so the reason why we look at the community mitigations is because we service more than just Westmont. As a matter of fact, we don't service all of Westmont. We just go as far south as 55th Street, but we pick up Clarendon Hills, we pick up Downers Grove. So when we're looking at community transmission, we also have to look at those communities that we serve as well. So again, we get called out on it sometimes but we are Community Unit School District 201. All right. So this is just to kind of talk a little bit about the next school year, and there is a board memo that it's not popping up, but looks right on there, but not in here. You know, a couple of things. One is we're in the process of finalizing our strategic plan. There's the working draft that there's a link to so that people can pull that up in our Portrait of a Graduate. And actually a lot of what we're doing currently is driven by those things. The other piece is that, you know, starting the 22-23 school year, we are transitioning Miller and Manning to grade level centers. We'll have a K-1 building at Miller and then a 2-5 school at Manning. And one of the questions that has come up in our, I don't know why this isn't working for me. One second, let me. There we go. So just a kind of a reminder, because this has come up a few times about, you know, the why and the goals and also metrics. And so I have some sample metrics. But again, this is about making sure that we have a quality elementary experience for all of our students within the district. And it's not depending upon which school that students attend. And then we defined what optimal systems included were when we went through the process. And we also talked about what the programming includes as well. And so these are some of the drivers why we're going to grade level centers. And then the most important piece, I think, one of the most important pieces is sustainability and being proactive. And we've been able to implement programs at a school, but then because of enrollment, we've had to you know, drop that program because we had to add another section. And so you know, this is sustainability as well. In terms of how we're going to measure whether or not this is having the positive impact that we anticipate, again, you know, the metrics we're looking at are our I-Ready assessments, our benchmark assessments, the Illinois Assessments of Readiness, which is the state required test, and then access, engagement, and experimental inquiry-based learning opportunities. That'll be driven by the 5 Essentials survey. There are actually student questions on the survey that provide us that data. The standards-based report card, and again, you know, student stakeholder engagement by the 5 Essentials. And to kind of give our community a little bit of a sense of what this looks like then, these are the IAR scores for Miller and Manning as K-5 buildings. So this, prior to COVID, the state assessment has changed since with the pandemic. But basically you can see where Manning scores are, Miller scores are, our district average. And so essentially, you know, our goal is that, you know, when we transition to the grade level centers, that we're not going to drop below our historical average. And then within a couple of years, we're actually outpacing what our prior scores were at Manning. So we're seeing that improvement. So we're closing that achievement gap, and we're seeing that growth. So in ELA and math, when we start looking at our I-Ready data, same thing. You know, our I-Ready data, we know where we were as separate schools, and we know what our historical average is. And as a result of this, we're going to be outpacing our historical average and then outpacing where we were as individual buildings. And so those are the kind of metrics that we'll be looking at, you know, in order to determine. And we'll drill down even into, you know, different subgroups. So students with IEPs, you know, underrepresented populations, low income. So again, making sure that we'll look at where we were historically, where we are now, and we should be able to see an increase in those scores. And then that's the I-Ready math. And so when we're talking about what metrics we're looking at, those are the types of metrics. You know, we're also going to be looking at the 5 Essentials data, which again gives us feedback. Students tell us if they're having experiential learning in their classrooms. You know, we get that feedback from our students themselves. And so that's from that data that parents also weigh in on the schools, and we take that data as well. And the other thing that we're doing for 22-23, right now we're starting our staffing conversations, so we're looking at staffing. In March, we'll be bringing that plan to the board to approve. We're also looking at transportation, because we know some of the challenges this past year, but now that we've locked into the grade level center concept, now we can plan for that. We can look at start time of buildings, and we can make sure that we address all those transportation needs, not only for Manning and Miller, but throughout the district as well. So we're reviewing all those things. So we will be, sharing this information on our website. We'll be on Manning and Miller's page as well, so that people understand, again, some of the metrics we're looking at, how we know that it's working. And then periodically, those reports will be coming back to the Board of Education so that they'll see, where those scores are, how they compare to prior to going to grade level centers and where they are currently.
Kevin, can you speak to, thank you for this, by the way. I think this is, I'm glad we are getting back to this conversation. Can you speak to the time frame when we should start to see positive results from grade level centers? So do you expect, I guess what I'm asking is, do you expect it to take a year or two before the positive impacts show up in the test scores, or do you think it's going to be?
I don't think we'll have a drop off, from the start. So we should definitely be hitting above our historical average. To get to above, like, let's say if we look just at Manning score, to get above Manning score, that might be a couple years down the road. But definitely we should be able to hit above the historical average for.
And how will we factor for the COVID impact relative to these historic numbers? I mean, I think that, these benchmarks are pre-COVID benchmarks, and we don't know how COVID has impacted students through 20 to 21 and now 21 to 22. And so how do we adjust basically for that when we're future
And
measuring?
with the IAR, we haven't had a true IAR assessment since the pandemic. And so that data we'll have to wait on. But in terms of iReady, we're already seeing significant growth in our students. So even though we're battling the pandemic, we're still seeing that growth and achievement. And so I think in terms of our iReady performance, I think we'll be able to, I don't think we'll see a true negative impact in terms of the iReady data, because that's based upon student growth, and we are seeing that student growth.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if you have the answer for this, Kevin, but I just want to bring up the point because it has been brought up in the past. There are people out there that feel that it's something at Miller is the reason that these numbers are lower than Manning. Can you speak if there's other, it's not necessarily the staff, but there are other, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm drawing a blank. There are other things that can lead to assessments looking like this, and not necessarily race-based.
Right.
Is that something you have seen in your history as an or as an educator?
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of factors. In some cases, it's low income, and sometimes that's the driver. It's just background knowledge. That sometimes students who come from a low income setting may not have the same background knowledge, and so sometimes then it takes a little bit longer to get those students up to speed. The IAPs, sometimes that can also be a factor. So you do have to look at the demographics of the schools, to see what the demographics are, and sometimes that can be one of the reasons why.
Okay.
Could resources be a part of that too, at your typically low-income schools, or low-income students at schools in that area? Their resources are not as, they don't get as many resources as, say, their counterparts in another area or school. So it's not necessarily, it's again, not race or
Right, it can be resources. The one challenge as well in our district, again, is when you have fluctuations in enrollment. And, you know, there are times that Manning would have more student supports in place than Miller would have. And it's not a matter of, you know, there isn't a need, it's just, you know, a question of staffing and, you know, there's only, again, we have limited resources. You know, we can't always hire as many people as like to because we have to stay within our budget. And so sometimes that is something that will occur too, that the student experience was different depending upon what school you were in because of staffing issues.
Any other questions for Kevin about this plan?
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment, and that is just that, you know, we have a PR committee meeting on Thursday, and I, as a member of the PR committee, will be bringing it up, but I just think we should think about communication on this plan, and I know we've heard it from the community, and I think it's an important thing that we have a communication plan on how we make sure that as many people know about this, the reasons why, what we're trying to achieve, what the metrics are, everything you just went through, which is great, should be broadcast as broadly as we can do and within reason, of course.
Right.
So just a comment, not a question.
Okay, thanks, Carlos. The next item on the agenda is the presentation of monthly financial statements.
Right. Good evening. I have both the December and January financial statements for you tonight. So during the month of December, the district received $388,000 from the state. $209,000 of that was for fiscal year 22. We did receive one installment of the 2021 tax levy in the amount of $124,000. So total property taxes collected at the end of December were $25.3 million, which was a 99.78% collection rate, which is just a slightly higher than the prior 2 years in December. As far as the ed and tort funds, the revenues are comparable to the prior year averages. And again, most of the income that we received was in the ed fund. There are $26,000 still of FY21 payments that we have not received yet. And the state has vouchered $106,000 of FY22 payments that we're still waiting on. In the O&M fund, revenues are just slightly lower than the prior year. Part of this is we have not received our classroom lease revenue from SACID yet, and I know they're working on that. In the transportation fund, our revenues are above the prior year averages. And there's $103,000 of fiscal year 22 payments vouchered that we're still waiting on. As far as expenditures go, the expenditures are comparable to the prior year averages. In the O&M fund, we were 39.14% spent to date versus 34.87% last year. And in the transportation fund, again, our expenditures are above the prior year averages, and those averages have been skewed because of the COVID-19 shutdown and the remote teaching experience that we had last year. And then when you look at the investments, we have $19.3 million invested. And again, you'll start to see fund balances, you know, continue to decrease until our next levy payments come through. And then also, I just wanted to point out in the lunch report, we actually, for the month of November, for year to date, we actually have a positive balance in our lunch fund. It's supposed to be a nonprofit school lunch program. We've always been not have a profit. But because of the higher reimbursement rates, federal reimbursement rates right now, this is the first time since I've been in the district that we have that we're in the black. So.
And, oh, I see. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I got you.
That's okay. Then when we go to the month of January, we received $367,000 from the state. We still have $26,000 of fiscal year 21 payments that we're waiting on, and $405,000 of fiscal year 22 payments. We did not receive a January installment this year, but the prior 2 years we did. So the collection rates in the prior 2 years now are very comparable to what we received overall, 99.78%. So that's one of the other things too, is that the tax payments have changed, fluctuated over the last couple years. They typically were, you knew you would always receive payments at certain times, and again, they've kind of fluctuated in the timing of payments. In the ed and tort funds, our revenues are comparable to the prior year average. Again, we received $259,000 of fiscal year 22 payments during the month, a lot, and then we're still waiting on that $26,000 from FY 21, and all of the FY 22 payments of $405,000 are in the ed fund. Again, in the O&M fund, revenues are lower than the prior year. Again, we still have not received the SACID lease revenue as of the end of January, and we're hoping to see that this month. They're a little bit behind in making their payments. In the transportation fund, our revenues are above the prior year averages. We did receive $103,000 from the state this month, and then there's no FY 22 payments vouchered. And as far as expenditures go, they're slightly above prior year averages in the ed fund. In the O&M fund, we're 45.93% spent to date. And again, expenditures are above average for transportation fund for the same reasons as December. And then if you look at the investment schedule, we have $17 million invested, so down about $2 million. And again, you'll see the amount invested continue to decrease because we're not receiving any additional tax revenue right now. And then when you look at the January lunch report, we're positive $26,000. So we'll start, I think we'll continue to see that go up through the end of the year. So, does anybody have questions?
On the lunch reports, a little bit positive in December, and we're trending up in January. Help me understand that. Is this like a weird quirk with how the reimbursements are coming through?
Yeah, it's the reimbursement rate. It's the higher reimbursement rate.
Okay, so can we spend more on our food for our kids? Based on the federal reimbursement being higher?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by that. I mean, I'm not sure what you mean by can we spend more? The food costs are the food cost. I mean, so if you want different types of lunch, or I'm not sure.
I mean, do we have the ability in this budget with the higher federal reimbursement to bring in higher quality options for our kids? Different options for the kids? I don't want to make money on lunch, right? Like,
well, we also have.
But is this like a weird quirk of like how the stuff is coming in?
It's an unusual circumstance. Like I said, in 12 years, this has never happened. Okay,
like, will we get less later in the year?
No, you're going to have the same. The reimbursement rate is going to be, it's higher, and then we have more kids participating because everyone is free. So this isn't a unique circumstance. We also aren't fully staffed, so that's one of the other issues that's going on. And then we also have significant equipment needs where we would utilize any money, excess funding to maybe purchase some equipment needs that we have for the kitchen, for the food service. Fran and I have applied for grants. We apply every year. We unfortunately don't get them because our free and reduced population is not quite high enough really for us to qualify. And so if we don't get those again this year, then that would be something I would be recommending, is that we purchase some of that equipment, because we've applied every year since I've been here and never received a grant from the National School Lunch Program.
I mean, I feel like if we want to talk about improving our school lunch program, that's something that should be a part of our planning process.
I think it's a different conversation.
It is,
like,
yeah.
But I would be remiss if I did not, like, I don't want to make money on this federal reimbursement, right? Like,
Right.
and when one of my children cannot eat the school lunch because there is dairy in every single piece of it, and I know that that's not the case I know that that is the case for other families too, but like, I'm not seeing a ton of changes on that lunch program, and I understand food costs quite well. So I want to make sure that, like, if we're getting some higher federal reimbursement, let's make sure that we're putting what we can back into that program, that where we have this, because I don't expect it to last past this school year, okay? But yes, I think we should have a larger conversation. I think it's part of our strategic plan, like that piece of it, but I'd be remiss if I did not ask, like, ask a question if we're making money here, right? Yeah, okay.
Right, and I would say if you have specific dietary needs, that those should be conversations that you have with Francesca Canzoneri.
I bring it up to make a point about the availability of different foods for kids.
Right, I know, but that would need to be addressed on a specific request, or by request.
I'm not
basis.
asking for it. I bring it up just to bring a point to the availability of the foods that are out there, and my personal experience of the availability of what the kids are having. I don't bring it up to ask for it. I just bring it up as just the availability.
But what are our options? What that we can go moving forward?
I mean, I feel like we need to table this until,
yeah.
I'm happy to put it on another agenda, because trust me,
Later
there's
on,
not a
we
lot
got
of positive
bigger
talk
fish
in my
to fry.
household about pasta sticks, but yeah, maybe it's something we can look at for a future agenda. Okay, any other questions for Kim? If not, we'll move into the IASB webinar and preparing for negotiations.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to not take a lot of time tonight. And I think that we should also probably put this on discussion for next week, or next meeting. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give everybody a very high overview, and then I'm also going to type out some more detailed notes. And I'm gonna email those to the board, and then I'd ask that Shannon, Kevin, if you guys can upload those onto the board docs for tonight, but then also the board docs for the next meeting, in the interest of transparency, so everybody can see what is being communicated around this. So I was in a Trends in Collective Bargaining webinar put on by the IASB a Saturday morning. We had a couple of speakers, 3 speakers, and they talked about 3 different things. So trends in employment law, which I'm going to be honest, it's just updates in laws. We don't have anything to do with them. We will follow them, okay? So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. But I will let you guys know what those updates are. Current trends in bargaining practices, and then also preparation, right? And so Lisa Calloway talked a little bit about current trends in bargaining practices, trends and challenges, right? So things that are coming up in a lot of negotiations or on the horizon for negotiations. Health and safety, right? No surprise there. Midterm bargaining, that is bargaining outside of your memos of understanding pieces that we kind of talked about in the last couple weeks. Combative, community kind of coming pieces. Distracting from things, from other things, right? Staff, unions pushing back on a variety of different things. CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index, which I don't know about you guys, but I can't get by 3 days without hearing about CPI. Funding, spending on the funds, lots of virtual negotiations, and the challenges that come with virtual negotiations, and the wins that come from virtual negotiations. And then a lot of talk about interest-based bargaining, which is something that I'm gonna talk about. It is something I'm very interested in. So, and some things that Lisa just kind of called out was some things like consider a rollover, of your contracts. Don't overcommit on financials in very uncertain times, right? We don't know if there are things that are going to continue going. Be thoughtful on board proposals. So make sure that if you're making a board proposal, you know, when you're in the middle of a negotiation and you make a proposal, that's going to be backed up by the board. So be really thoughtful on your proposals. And I don't say these things to say that we are not thoughtful. I actually think we're incredibly thoughtful. I say them because these are some things that are brought up. And on that be thoughtful piece of it is sustainability, right? Are your proposals sustainable long-term? And making sure that they can really be honored. So that was really the gist of Lisa Calloway, and I will send you some more notes on her. But I do want to talk a little bit more on Brian Barr's presentation was titled Failure to Prepare is Preparation to Fail. And I would agree with that, absolutely. We've got all three of our unions this year. Yes? No? Two?
Not this year.
Coming up?
One this year.
Well, starting up.
Right.
Yeah. So some topics that he talked about were who to involve in the preparation process, what advanced prep can you do, prep during the bargaining process, and then if your negotiations start to stall. So who to involve in the prep. So I was not involved in the prep for our last round of negotiations. I wasn't on the board yet. And so I don't know if these things are done or not. But thinking about, you know, which board members are going to be involved in the prep, who's on the negotiating team, but who's also, you know, kind of giving input as well. What school district administrators are on the team or not on the team, but give input, because obviously our administrators need to give a lot of input. Your legal counsel, of course, he really pushed on make sure you keep your legal counsel involved, and I was like, are there lots of districts that negotiate without their legal counsel? And that didn't seem like a real good idea to me. So, you know, keep your legal counsel involved because they're going to understand issues, trends, hot topics, employment law that needs to be updated for your language in your contracts. Some under advanced prep, and this was something that I would say we are in that part right now, is advanced prep, is don't be dismissive, right? Jot down hot topics. Look at your notes from your last bargaining cycle. If you don't have notes from the last bargaining cycle, set up a method to keep notes, right? So a method for everybody who's available to give input, right? That may not be on the bargaining team, but have kind of these ways, right? That the administrators can have some input and other members that are in. One really big thing that he kind of called out was read your contract and take a lot of notes. And this is something that I think would be particularly beneficial for us, as most of us are new to the board. And I jumped into the last negotiation like midway through, right? So truly understanding what is in our contracts. And taking a lot of notes about them. Can we simplify them, right? Addition through subtraction. Are things in there because they're archaic and they're just kind of like stones dragging you along, right? So they mentioned Google Doc. What are other districts doing, especially in terms of comp and benefits? Sick pay, stuff like that. So keeping in mind our neighboring districts and our districts that were really similar to, like Lyle. Languages, talk to your peers. For the team, make sure that you meet, are able to review your notes. Decide on your end goals, talk about your starting proposals, prepare some talking points. Like really, you know, prepare, have a really good idea of what don't just have one end goal, right? Like don't have, this is the only thing that I want. Because if we walk into if the board walks into it with like, this is what we need or want, this one thing, we're not leaving anything to talk about, right? Some things about prepping with all the groups, right? Have some great ground rules in place, have a really good process in place that's agreed on by everybody. No surprises, right? Plan for the worst case scenario, so plan for kind of everything to go wrong, and then you'll have a lot of stuff in there. Set the tone if you're gonna have formal or informal negotiations. Get your housekeeping done first, right? So this is edits of language. This is edits of laws that have changed, right? So law changes and it's in a contract. It's just updated, okay? And that's just part of it. So get those housekeeping edits out of the way, and find your language inconsistencies. Things like where you said someone's a teacher and someone's an employee, or, get all that stuff figured out. Pronouns, if we decide to adjust the pronouns in our contracts. Address anything that should not be in dispute, basically. Then kind of go into your first negotiation session, what to do then, and then sessions 2 through 4, which I'll send you guys in kind of an email, because I don't want to go into that too much. And he talked about like some general strategies during your sessions, the home stretch, how can you prep for that? What happens if you come to an impasse and you get to mediation? What happens then? How does that work? And also he spent just a little bit of time on posting and strikes, because you can't have a negotiation conversation and not talk about posting and the potential for strikes. And really the two, like long story short, best practices are start your prep early and always strive to keep good relations. I think that's something that as a board we have talked about a lot, is really trying to make sure that that we have great relationships with our unions, in the same way that we need to have great relationships with our communities. So we need to work on all of those relationships. And so what I will do is I'll kind of wrap all this up. Like I said, I'm going to shoot it to you in an email, and then we can add it onto the doc. So then next meeting, we can have a discussion on it. If you guys have any further questions about it, if you would like to watch the webinar, it is up on the IASB website. It was maybe 3 hours. And Brian was in the beginning of it, so if you're most interested in Brian's part of it, watch the beginning of it. So we can just have a conversation and start to think about timelines, right? And if we need to have Jeff come in and talk to us about what are the differences between interest-based bargaining and more standard negotiations, and what our options are, right? So we can start doing that all now. So does that sound good? Does anybody have any questions for me right now?
That was really helpful, Leah, and thank you, and be careful because you're earning yourself a job. Just kidding. Okay, so we're going to move to action items. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the updated COVID-19 mitigation plan as discussed at the board table tonight, and authorize the superintendent to make the recommended updates to the mitigation plan.
So moved.
Second.
I have questions, just to make sure I'm clear. So Kevin, from what you understand, you agree with the premise that your previous proposed plan was intact, like pulling away this, how stringent we looked at our provisions, and instead of using 2 requirements, we were going to use 1, and that was the positivity rate, taking away the total new cases per 100,000, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then right now, with our changes, we don't have any clear thresholds or indications at this time of when we're going to make change. We're delaying a decision. And we're going to wait until, with that delaying, we're waiting till the health department gives some indication of when cases are increasing, instead of looking at our own inner school or community numbers, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. Just making sure I'm clear.
And the quarantine, the close contact quarantine.
We're changing from.
And we're going with the recommended
Instead of
close
validating
contact exclusion.
indications, okay.
Right, so any other questions before we call for roll call? Okay, roll call, please.
Ms. Hoover?
No.
Ms. Steckity?
No.
Ms. Conover?
Yes.
Mr. Marin?
No.
Ms. Coyle?
Yes.
Mr. Avia?
Yes.
Ms. Redonio?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. The next item on the agenda is the superintendent's report.
So a couple items in my report. Just a reminder that for incoming kindergarten students for the 22-23 school year, registration will take place at Miller Elementary School beginning March 23rd through 25th, April 4th through 8th, April 11th through 14th, from 9 to 11, and from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. If those dates and times don't work for a family, they can contact the Miller office and schedule an appointment. CUSD 201 offers a full-day monolingual and bilingual kindergarten program, as well as a half-day option at Miller. The state law requires that the child must be 5 years of age before September 1st, 2022. To be admitted into kindergarten, we must have a notarized copy of your child's birth certificate with the embossed seal. Hospital certificates are not acceptable. And then congratulations to Westmont High School Principal Jack Balderman. We were notified today that Jack was selected as a Golden Apple Award for Excellence in Leadership finalist. Mr. Balderman is one of 6 finalists of over 100 principals nominated in Illinois. So congratulations to Jack.
Congratulations. Are there any board reports?
As you heard from John earlier, the community did really contribute, and we surprised South with some treats on Valentine's Day. Aside from that, the elementaries did a warm your hearts for the staff at Miller and Manning. So that's where we're at there.
Awesome. Thank you. Any other board reports? Okay. We have an opportunity for public comment. Thank you.
I promise not to keep you. I'm just as tired as you are. I had to become like a fake teacher this week because I'm subbing. My name is Dana Hajek. I have students at Westmont Junior High, Manning, and Miller schools. I'm also a sub in the district. I'm not up here to talk to you about masking or COVID or any of that business. I'm up here to talk a little bit about my perspective and what I'm seeing as a sub in the building. I know that we all know as adults that our children listen and our children hear and our children see and learn a lot more than we think they're doing at times. I'm here to kind of implore on our community that our elementary school, our Manning Elementary School, just went through a respect challenge, and our grades 2 through 5 were challenged by their teachers and their administration to learn what it means to show and give and accept respect. And I struggle at times to see our community be a good model of that behavior. I'm here to remind us as community members that it is our responsibility to our children to model this behavior, how we talk about each other, members of our school community and members of our outer community, is falling on little ears. And it's coming out of little mouths in the classroom. So I'm just here to remind us that we are going to disagree. We are not going to agree on everything. If you are having a conversation on the phone or in the backyard or at the playground, be mindful of who's listening. Because a lot of times those listeners become talkers. And then they come into school and it turns into a thing. And that doesn't need to be another thing. Our kids have enough things they are trying to mitigate, for lack of a better word, right now. They don't need those grown-up business. So if we could just do a little bit better job as a community, and I'm saying this as a whole, it's not one side, the other, it's everybody got to do better. Secondly, please come sub. I'm really tired. Really tired. If you have a college degree, it is easy as filling out some paperwork to be a sub. If you don't have a college degree, it's easy as taking a class to come be a sub. We need more subs because the subs we have are tired and we're working hard and we are not filling the staffing needs. As much as we want to pat ourselves on the back of we're doing such a good job, we're not filling those needs. And when we don't fill those needs, it worries me because the first kids who miss out are the kids who need it the most. There are kids who are our special ed kids. There are kids who need interventions. Those kids don't get them because now that teacher is filling in over here. And it's by no fault of the staff. They're doing as best as they can. But if we don't have subs in this district, that's who's going to miss out. And I just want to say that as plainly as I can. If I can't come in and sub as a TA, that TA gets pulled to a classroom. All of the students in that classroom who needed that TA support that day don't have it. And that happens on a daily basis in every school. So if you want to be part of this community and help this community, that's the best thing you can do. Go be a sub. Tell them I'll only do 1 day a week because I got another job. I can only do 1 day. It's better than no days. But we need more people to help us keep this in-person learning experience good for all of our students. Thank you.
Thanks, Dana.
Thanks, Dan.
Good, how are you doing? Good. This is Ben Vidito.
Yep, hi, my name's Ben Vidito. I got a couple kids in the district. I actually wanted to just kind of ask, Bill Regala's not here. And Laura, I know at the beginning of the meeting you said if there's questions that either you or Kevin address them. Bill Regala has been here speaking on the behalf of many parents of the community, and you guys have not addressed any of it for months. And if it's something that you guys did kind of sneak in on the community and proud of, like he'd said, you guys aren't answering the questions or bring anything that people are asking for. And I just kind of, he's not here to remind you guys, and I just kind of wondering how come the board's not addressing any of that? It just falls on deaf ears, and I kind of don't agree with that. So I just kind of like to hear some of the answers to the questions that he is asking, and that you guys say that you guys are going to address. Out of the two of you guys are just totally ignoring the guy, and it's kind of rude, to be honest. So hopefully you guys will have something next week or next month.
Thanks, Benny. All right. So there's no need for a second closed session. We do have future meetings and events. So the PR committee meeting is February 24th, 2022 at 6 p.m. at Westmont Junior High School. The BPAC meeting, March 2nd, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. There's a Westmont High School, Westmont Junior High School combined choir concert, March 2nd, 2022 at 7 p.m. There's a Teacher Institute Day, no student attendance on March 4th, 2022. There's an elementary PTO and committee meeting, March 7th, 2022 at 6 p.m. at Manning Elementary School. Westmont Junior High School PTO meeting, March 9th, 2022 at 7 p.m. Early dismissal for parent-teacher conferences, SIP dismissal times, March 10th, 2022. Parent-teacher conferences from 5 to 9 p.m. No student attendant parent-teacher conferences, March 11th, 2022 from 8 to 11 p.m. And then school board meeting, March 15th, 2022 at 6 p.m. at Westmont Village Hall. And with that, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'd also like a public comment to say happy birthday to Ange Steckity.
Oh, report. Happy birthday, Ange Steckity.
Report. Whatever.
Everybody cheer for Ange.
Good.
Okay, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn the February 22nd, 2022 regular meeting of the Board of Education.
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?